Hey everyone, welcome back to 99 Everything, the podcast where we aim to maximize every single dimension of our lives because we want to live the best life possible. So today's guest is, I believe, currently in Lithuania, and
That's
he's
correct.
originally from Perth. Cool. He's originally from Perth, Western Australia, and that's why we have another online episode today. And we'll kind of delve into why he's kind of in Lithuania and yeah, pretty much his background and why he's currently just doing that kind of stuff there. Um, but pretty much to introduce our guest, he is a holistic health coach. He studied with the Czech Institute, and he has helped dozens of men optimize and recover their hormones and live a better life possible. He has also has expertise in longevity, biohacking, and also brain injury recovery. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guest, Dave Lee. Hey, Dave.
Hey, man, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome, man. So, just to start off, I'd just like to fill in the listeners to how I um, first interacted with you, because I am currently one of your clients too, and the experience so far has been really fruitful. But our first encounter actually played a big role in why I decided to sign up with you anyway. So, yeah, just to fill in the listeners and all the viewers. So, pretty much back in April this year, April 2022, um, I was selected to be on a TV show, some random dating show in on Channel 9, and um, I was also at that time on testosterone. So they had in the what do you call it? The medical checklist, pretty much, because I had to go do a medical from the doctors, and there was all these procedures, and pretty much one of them was like, "Are you on any medications?" Pretty much, and if it was a dating show, and from my experiencing from watching dating shows, they pretty much film you all the time, and I there was like a 1% thought in my mind is like maybe I'll just bring my needles. That was ended up not being an option. So I messaged our mutual acquaintance, Oscar Mares, and asked him what type of PCT I should do to, I guess, get off and be as healthy as I could um, when I eventually did the show. And he pointed me towards our guest, Dave. And um, Dave, you pretty much just called me and just gave me like a free call on how to PCT and what to do moving forward. And that was I found that very it was very special because with all the knowledge you have, you just decided to help a random dude. And yeah, so I did end up going through that protocol. Funnily enough, I went through like legal backgrounds, psychology backgrounds, but I didn't make it at the final checkpoint, which I think it was more to do with like a narrative scripting reason. But it all worked out. I ended up going back on testosterone and then competing, and like I love where I am at the moment. But yeah, that's pretty much how I got to know you. Um, yeah, so appreciate what you did for me there. And just to kind of get straight into it, like what got you into doing what you currently do, and I guess what was your childhood like to kind of pave the way to where you are now?
Sure. Yeah. So I had in hindsight, I had a very privileged childhood. I'm very grateful for my childhood. I don't think anyone's childhood, well, I'm sure some people, but I wouldn't say it was perfect, but it was pretty damn fucking close, I think. I went to a very nice private boys' school in Perth, Western Australia, which I now joke about with my parents that I learnt so much about the real world from that school because of how much of a shit time I had following the rules. Um, it was a great little experiment in how the world works, how male hierarchies work. Um, it was a fascinating insight for me because I went through school at the bottom of that hierarchy. So that was a very powerful learning experience for me. I primarily grew up as a musician, really. Like from the age of 5, I started playing the violin. I played that and then transitioned into the viola for about 8 years. Played the piano for about 6, and then I transitioned into drumming when I was in my senior years. I was very into punk rock music. I remember very distinctly my nana bought me my first album. It was a compilation album called Total Rock 2. And she bought me that because we went into a music store and I think I was about 6, and I wanted the song Tribute by Tenacious D. I wanted that song on a CD, which naturally was an awesome song. And they only had this compilation album there. So it was like a 2 CD compilation, and it had all these bands on it from Rammstein, Good Charlotte. Um, Looking back, if someone can look up Total Rock too, they'll find it. But it was just a big compilation of like punk, classic rock, metal, hard rock. And from the age of 6, 7 years old, like all I really cared about was punk rock music. I loved it. I don't know what it was about it that I loved it, but I think it was because it made me feel something. I really liked the experience of that kind of more aggressive, harder style of music. So I graduated school, joined a couple of bands, got a really cool opportunity to actually become a singer in a band. So I got to live that kind of childhood dream of being a vocalist on stage, and had the time of my life doing that. And then um, studied at a music academy for a period. I was bouncing around university because my parents wanted me to go to university, but I didn't really know what to do. So I kind of chopped and changed different degrees. And anyway, I was doing law at the time, and I remember kind of having this conversation with a friend who was like, look, if you want to do law, you kind of have to excel. Like you have to get A's. Like you can't just pass. And because I was touring and doing music as a priority and kind of doing university as a plan B, I remember going to the guidance counselor at university, or the course coordinator, or whoever they are, and I said, look, I want to transition out of law. What degree can I get with what I've already studied? And she kind of looked through my transcript and she went, look, you can get a marketing degree if you do another 4 business units. So that's how I got a Bachelor of Marketing. I interned for an amazing digital marketer who was my best friend at the time, who taught me everything about digital brand management. So I was working for a digital agency. I went out on my own after that, and I was doing digital marketing management primarily for nightclubs. So launching nightclubs, live music events, doing very well at it. And then I ended up having quite a severe brain injury at about the age, I believe I was 24 or 25. 2 days before my birthday, I woke up and the world was spinning. So if you imagine like spinning around on an office chair 50 times and standing up, that's what it was like for me just one morning. Fell into my wardrobe, went to hospital, and it didn't let up. So it was a very severe, dark, traumatic period of my life because it was like that 24/7 for years. Um, that was a very difficult period in my life. I moved back in with my parents, had to close down my business. I was looking at going on disability pensions. I got very dark for a lot of periods because every doctor told me it was never going to get any better. Um, and there was a few points, and we can definitely get into this further if you'd like a longer version of this. But there was a few points facilitated by a psychedelic treatment, as well as a few other darker points in the road, where I basically decided to go all in on rehab to try to fix this and give it a good shot. And at the end of it, I couldn't close the gap of about the last 10 to 20% of what I was dealing with. So I decided to go back to university to learn how to heal the brain. So I enrolled in a postgraduate diploma in science so that I could transition into a master's in science, because if you do an undergrad in business, you can't go into a master's in science. So went into neuropsychiatry and dropped out very, very quickly because I realized that, in my opinion, that whole system is a scam and it's full of shit. But what that taught me was how to read studies and how science worked. So that led me onto a big road in terms of understanding how to heal my brain. And a big part of what I was very interested in, as a bit of a tangent, was I was very curious as to why so many men, particularly, had this low-grade issue of depression, low-grade anxiety. And what that led me to, when realizing that most psychiatric drugs don't fix the root cause and in general don't work and are potentially neurotoxic, it led me to understanding that hormones in the brain sit upstream from so many neurological functions and dictate so strongly how we feel. And if it wasn't for going on testosterone, I don't think I would have been able to get through the rehab that I did, because it was such a difficult, challenging journey that in a hypergonadal low testosterone state from the chronic stress I was experiencing. And arguably, I probably had low testosterone growing up. I don't think I could have pushed through with that. So interestingly, I mean, I haven't told many people this and spoken about this much before, but when I started doing my, I guess, helping people with their health, I was kind of just doing it to give me a purpose to get through my own journey. So I was mainly helping people with the stuff that I was going through, the vestibular rehabilitation issues. And as I progressed forward from that, my vision and my purpose for what could I do if I actually got through this and recovered and made it through this brutal rite of passage in my life was I wanted to fight for people. I wanted to give back to people. I wanted to help people. I'd been living a relatively selfish and hedonistic lifestyle up until that point, and I wanted to create more purpose and meaning and wanted to leave a legacy. Originally, I didn't think I would make it through what I was going through, and I wanted to. I basically wanted to leave a legacy behind where if I didn't make it, at least people would go, "Fuck, that dude went down swinging. That guy was a force of nature." And in that process, I ended up making it through and transitioned into teaching people what I learned in my journey, not only the hormone replacement therapy side of things, but also the mindsets, the strategies, and the evolution of what we are capable of if we truly push ourselves and see what we're made of.
Man, there's a lot of things to dive in from in there. I'm also a drummer myself, and I also grew up listening to a lot of hardcore. Yeah, a lot of hardcore bands coming. Like I'm sure you've heard of North Lane and like Polaris and all that. A lot of them coming out of Sydney. Like I was watching them when they were coming up. So that's
We
really
played
cool.
with Polaris in a tiny little rec center in a country town. I'll have to look it up. And it was the second time we played with them. The first time we played with Polaris, um, it was well before they put out the album with like Lucid on it and like Relapse
Yeah,
and those tracks.
yeah.
The album before that, and I remember watching them. So it was us, a band called Storm the Sky, and then Polaris,
Storm the Sky,
and
cool. Yeah,
yeah, and so we were playing under them, and we didn't know who these guys were. And I remember watching Polaris side of stage at this tiny little. It was like a converted nightclub in I think it was in Newcastle, and I was just like, "Holy shit, this is like Under Oath but better." And I remember when they came off stage, I remember pulling Jamie aside, the singer, and saying, "You guys are going to be fucking huge." And it was so cool to watch them kind of transcend. And I saw them a few years ago in Perth, and I think they probably sold maybe 700-800 tickets, and it was just packed, and they were just pumping, and it was amazing to see these guys who just had so much potential and passion and energy on stage to get to where they've gotten to. It's been amazing. So yeah, man, it was interesting when I was drumming. Drumming was actually one of the things that got me through the dark period I was in because I had so much issues moving my head for my balance, but I could still drum as long as I kept my head locked in. But my brain didn't really work, so I couldn't remember how songs worked and like the flow of songs. So I actually started a project with my friend James, and it was called Ultima Armada. We've got a live set on YouTube where he would DJ and I would play drums along to his DJing, but it was all improvised, so I wouldn't have to remember how the songs went, but I could still perform and play drums. So yeah, drumming has been such a huge part of my development and part of my life because it's such a the thing I loved about drumming was like when you play the violin or play the piano, there's rules with like your posture and you have to sit like this and you have to do a certain thing. With drumming, you can set your kit up any way you'd like. Like I would watch Travis Barker play and I loved his style. And I loved how drumming was just such this, it was like this expression of more of yourself as a musician rather than kind of playing the parts that someone else had written for you.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny because Travis and DJM used to do that too, like the DJ and drumming kind of mix.
Mhm.
But yeah, like a lot of just we'll finish on the drumming thing because I could talk about this for ages. But um, a lot of like people like say like he's got the worst form and he's got the worst technique, but he's also like one of the most fun drummers to watch because he gives it his all. It's so entertaining to watch him as a drummer.
Absolutely. And that's what inspired me. Like whenever like I'll have to send you this clip from my first show when I was like 17 years old. And yeah, Travis was what inspired me to put on a show as a drummer. And like also just to go all out and to have that experience of what I would call the alpha brain state or the flow state, where you're completely present in what you're doing. And for me, like if I walked off stage and hadn't broken a bunch of my equipment and wasn't dripping in sweat, it wasn't a good show.
I feel that. I feel that. But yeah, so it's really interesting because I also found through my own use of testosterone that it's almost uncovered like an underlying, um, like I feel so much more selfless, and I want to like, I have so much purpose now, and I want to give back so much. And it's really interesting when you were like just relaying your story of how like even if you didn't make it, you want to leave, like you want to keep like a legacy for people. And yeah, I don't know. It's like I feel like I can resonate with that on some level. It's just you feel so. Um, it's it's a strange word, but enlightened when you're on it. I feel like, and I know we're going to delve into this and how it's not a panacea, and it's like this is not it's not a miracle drug. It's like it depends on how you use it. But yeah, I guess let's just dive straight into that main question: is like, what is going on with male testosterone levels, depression, anxiety at the moment? Like, why is there such a massive plummet in our current society with testosterone?
It's a very good question, and I think it's a very multifactorial situation. I think it's a combination of everything, and I think some things play a bigger role than others, but it's a combination of a lot of factors. So an interesting thing to start with is like people throw around different statistics about like, we don't have the same testosterone levels as our grandfathers did, and yada yada yada. And to give it some hard context going in, so for those who don't know, testosterone peaks when we assume it's about when people finish puberty, whenever that is in your individual timeline. So 17 to 22, depending on the individual, and then assuming that you're in good health, you basically have a linear decline in your hormone levels from that point until you die. So it very gradually declines over time. And that's just how men work. So you're in your peak when you're younger, and then you gradually decline over the course of your life. Now, if you get obese or if you don't look after yourself properly, then obviously then your levels will decline faster, and that will be a factor as well. But there's a lot going on that impacts this. So when we look at endocrine disruption, so just disruption and interfering with this correct hormone pattern that we're supposed to be having, one factor is, and this is purely the things that I believe are the main factors, is the pesticides in the food, the actual composition of the diet shifting away from animal-based and animal-based fats, or animal-based foods, animal-based fats, with the introduction of vegetable oil as our primary fat source. That was a huge factor with the elimination of vitamin A, E, D, K, and cholesterol from the diet in significant amounts. Then you've also got the modern lifestyle, so more sedentary, less physical activity, more time indoors, more disruption of the natural circadian rhythm. And then we've got all these other factors, which is a societal conditioning away from masculinity, which I believe is a big factor. And then you've also got the stuff that is a little bit more nuanced and a little bit less clear, stuff like EMF exposure, factors like that. And then you've also got, the amount of birth control metabolites in the water, all these microplastics, so many other factors. I also think plastic and polyester exposure is a factor too. But I think that there are just so many things that not only impact us over the course of our lives, but also likely impacted our parents and grandparents, when we were in utero, sucking on a pacifier when you're a baby. All those different things have impacted us over so many years, but also our epigenetic coding coming into this world where and this is one of the big factors as well. I also think being obese during puberty is a big factor too that a lot of people don't talk about. Huge, huge, huge one. But what's happening as a result is you've got widespread suffering. You've got a whole bunch of guys who are doing everything they possibly can, and their testosterone levels are still in the in the gutter. But there was an interesting study that I was looking at a while back for an unrelated purpose. It was one of the very few interventional studies on aromatase inhibitors in men, and it was done in 2012. And there was this like side note by the authors in the paper where, and this is why it's so important when if people want to look at science, you actually have to read the whole study, not the abstract. And what the what the authors found before the intervention, so just in like the pre-trial screening, was that they had two groups. They had a group of men under 25 and a group of men over 60. And they found that there was no statistical difference between their baseline testosterone levels. So men under 25 and men over 60 in 2012, in this Western cohort, there was no difference in their testosterone levels. That is hugely problematic, because if guys are only peaking at the point they should be when they're 60, then it's all downhill from there. And one thing that I think is a huge factor, which I spoke recently about at my friend Ali Gilbert's Silverback Summit, was what happens to a man's psyche, what happens to a man's mental health. And I'm much more interested in mental health than stuff like bodybuilding and muscle hypertrophy. What happens to a man's mental health when he doesn't have that experience of peak androgen exposure during his development? And then, so what happens when this man goes through life and goes through these formative years when he's always got the lowest testosterone level in the room? How is that going to impact his confidence? How is that going to impact how he sees himself in the world? But also, how is that going to set up the trajectory of him going forward in life, having a purpose, taking risks, and actually becoming something of himself, and even wanting to do that? Because it is testosterone that impacts the way that a lot of not only neurotransmitters work in relation to drive and motivation and pleasure, but also acting as an antagonist, as an opposition to the effects of stress on the body. So what's happening with these younger guys is they're finding life much more difficult than they should. They're much less motivated and driven to go out and do the things that they want to do. But then the problem is that they think that it's due to their lack of discipline. They think it's because they've got all these issues where it's all up here, it's all mental. They're not trying hard enough. And that is a big factor. A lot of guys aren't trying hard enough, but a lot of them are walking around the world or going through the world with a broken foundation from the start. And they have no idea, because they go to the doctor with all these symptoms. They go to the person who has been appointed by society in the role to heal them, who they trust. And then that person is telling them and saying, oh, you need an antidepressant. Or they're not checking their blood work. They're not talking about the diet and lifestyle. They're not doing any of that. They're going, oh, you've got a serotonin deficiency, which is bullshit. That's never been proven. And here's some Lexapro or some Zoloft or some Prozac or whatever the pharmaceutical sales rep of the day has encouraged them to prescribe, which they know nothing about. And then what happens? And we have an even worse situation where the testosterone levels are further suppressed, and the individual suffers even more, and then ends up on a medication that now all of a sudden they've got all these side effects, but they can't get off it. And it's heartbreaking for me to see and know how many men this is happening to every single day.
Yeah, wow. Like you said, it's a very multifaceted issue. Um, I already agree with I knew to an extent diet would play a role into it, but I didn't know even like the seed oils, the pesticides, like I guess the water we drink. I do know there has been like shitting on men has been really in vogue in the last 5 years. I think that's starting to flip around a bit more. But yeah, also I guess also just like men's mental health has never been really taken seriously, or just has been very poorly managed in the whole, I guess, medical space and psychology space. So um, man, I don't even know where to go from here. Like, there's just so many things you can talk from here. But I guess for any man who is like feeling like that kind of the kind of things you're saying, like just hits them, like they've been doing everything right, they've been training, they've been eating better, sleeping better, and they still don't feel right. What are some natural remedies that you would recommend that are not commonly, I guess, um, recommended currently?
Sure. So without without throwing stones here, there's a lot of herbal supplements which are being promoted at the moment for boosting testosterone. I encourage people, before looking into taking those supplements, simply just going on a website called examine.com and reading for yourself the human studies on these compounds. And you might find the one that's being pushed the most actually has no research in humans for safety or efficacy, but that's a different story. So I think what people need to be looking at with this is there's no capsule, there's no supplement, there's no quick overnight fix that you can just take in the morning and then resolve all these issues. Um, your endocrinology is a consequence and also a positive feedback loop from how you show up in the world and who you are. So it's everything from your habits, your diet, your sun exposure, your community, your purpose, your physical health, physical pain and inflammation in the body, body composition, how much body fat you have, how much muscle you have. And all of those factors to resolve and to improve are much more difficult, much less marketable than take this pill, it will fix the problem. So the big factors that guys want to be looking at here is, I think, nutrition and exercise are the two lowest hanging fruits for a lot of people, but they're also the hardest thing to work on. So I encourage people to look at, well, firstly, what is testosterone made from, and then what modulates androgen receptors in the body. And when you look at the nutrients that impact that, it's basically everything that you find in red meat. Creatine, carnitine, choline, three C's that I talk about a lot in nutrition. They both have, all three of them have an impact on the metabolism of testosterone into DHT, which is a more potent androgen in the body, which is metabolized by a 5-alpha reductase, but also modulating the function of the androgen receptor. Vitamin D is also a factor in that. All hormones are made from cholesterol. Vitamin A, E, and K, in addition, the fat soluble nutrients, all have modulatory functions on the androgen and estrogen receptors. So, increasing the amount of egg yolks, or whole eggs, but including the yolk, not just the whites, whole eggs, good quality red meat in the diet is extremely important. And one of the big issues with the seed oils is, in addition to the pro-inflammatory nature of the omega-6 industrial seed oils, it's the fact that they're completely devoid of nutrients. So you're replacing, 40, 50, 60 grams of fat a day, which is nutrient dense, with 40, 50, 60 grams of fat a day with no nutrients in it whatsoever. And that's a big problem. So we're missing a lot of the precursors that the body actually needs to make testosterone. And it's one of the reasons why I'm such a fan of Stan Efferding's vertical diet. I think that's an excellent framework for people just to go, okay, what's a framework? What's a template that I can start with? I think that's a good start for a lot of people. Um, so that's a factor as well. And then looking at your lifestyle, I think what a lot of guys need to understand is that going to the gym 3 to 4 times a week for an hour to 90 minutes and then sitting on your ass for the rest of the 7 days is not enough. Humans need more than 5 hours of exercise a week. So people need to move more. If the sun is available, which, I mean, it's not available to me now. I think it's about minus 15 outside. If the sun is available to you, you want to get sun exposure. You need to move more, not just training your ass off in the gym, but going for walks, mobility work, moving your body, not being sedentary for massive periods of time, sitting behind a screen, and then having all this stiffness and tightness in your body, which the systemic inflammation is then down regulating the function of dopamine, which is the main neurotransmitter, which is going to actually give you that get up and go and drive to go out and do all these things. So diet and lifestyle is the biggest factor in this. And the problem for a lot of guys, and this is the part that is very difficult, is that you have these guys who are doing all of that stuff to the nth degree. Like, they're doing it so right. They're doing everything they possibly can, and their testosterone levels are still in the gutter. And what I'm referring to this as is, I'm calling this generational hypergonadism, or there's different terms for it coming up now. Androgen resistance is a factor as well, where these guys just don't seem to be able to respond properly to these inputs in terms of making the right amount of androgens. And I think that's a long-term downstream exposure of these endocrine disrupting factors happening over multiple generations. So now we're getting to a point where the vessel's just broken, like it just doesn't work. And I think some people are too far gone. Obesity during puberty, I think, is a big factor. But I think a lot of guys just got off to a bad start with this. And that's why it is so integral for, and it's why I'm so proud of all my clients when they come to me, because they fucking worked all this shit out. Like they were the one, like their doctor said, nah, you don't need to get your testosterone levels checked. You're only 25. And then they've gone out and researched everything they need to do it. And they're still doing everything right. And then they realize their levels are still low. And then they come to someone like me to talk about TRT. And That's what more guys need to do is to think critically and take control of their own health, take ownership and responsibility of the situation, and look in and go, hey, I'm 24, 25, 26, whatever. I'm doing everything right. I'm looking after myself the best way possible, and I still can't get an erection. I still feel like shit. I still can't put on any muscle mass, and I'm depressed. And if that is what is going on with you when you're listening to this and you're like, fuck, that resonates, you got to go out and get your hormones checked. But you've also got to accept that the Western medical model is not going to help you because the doctors are not trained in this actually being an issue and this being a solution. You can go to an endocrinologist who is a professional hormone specialist, and they will laugh you out of the fucking room. And if you are fortunate enough to get a TRT protocol off one of these guys, it's going to be a terrible, outdated TRT protocol, which barely will shift your levels north of where they are now. So there's a huge amount of responsibility that I think guys shouldn't have to take, because obviously you should be able to walk into the doctor and actually have your health fixed. But this is where the ball has landed. And I think if guys can just go, okay, this is shit, this is likely corrupt, this is not what it should be, but this is where the ball has landed, and I've just got to play it and take responsibility for it. You can take the ownership and responsibility through interventional endocrinology to change your life.
I think just having like um, exposure to, I guess, knowledge and like people like yourself is what can help people, I guess, take that responsibility. Because I think most men just have no idea. Like it's a default state of feeling like shit, you know. And yeah, I think it's just like people like Oscar and like yourself, like you guys bring awareness to things like this. So yeah, it's awesome. Like keep doing what you're doing. I had two things I wanted to speak on with what you were mentioning before.
Mm.
Do you think seed oils replace red meat? Is that like a cost effective thing? Like why is yeah?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a great podcast. It's actually on Ben Greenfield's podcast, but I can't remember who he interviews. It might have been one with Thomas DeLauer, but it's quite an old one where they go through the backstory with this. But there's a guy, I think his name's Brian Sanders. He has an Instagram called Food Lies, where he's done a good little documentary or video on this topic as well. But basically, seed oil, such as cottonseed oil, is an industrial byproduct of farming cotton. So what happened is that they had this byproduct that was a waste product, and then they had it approved as a food source, and then now you can sell your waste as a food. So double your profits, take your trash, sell it as food. And there was a huge marketing campaign around Crisco, where in all these cooking magazines, they replaced recipes with butter with Crisco, which is just basically just garbage waste seed oil crap. So it infiltrated people's pantries as a marketing campaign for people to basically make more money off this. And then you've got this whole other branch of theories around this, which was that it was a deliberate ploy to poison the population and reduce their hormone levels. And I think it's viable. I try not to go too far down those rabbit holes in terms of what I talk about publicly, because I think that there's not enough definitive evidence to determine that that's 100% what happened. But the reality of the situation in terms of what can't be disputed is Crisco entered the market at that point. It was very heavily marketed. Butter and other forms of saturated fat were wrongly demonized as the cause of heart disease. And then now we're in a situation where we're going, okay, we replaced the majority of the saturated fat in the diet, and heart disease has gone through the fucking roof. So didn't solve anything. And it's one of the most fascinating things when you do this work and you review people's blood work all day, every day. When you get the vegetarians and the vegans who eat no animal fat or cholesterol in the diet whatsoever, they're the ones with the worst lipid profiles. So it's an interesting field, and but yes, I think it came down to profitability was definitely a huge factor. And then could it have been an intentional effort to disrupt hormone levels and cause disease? Potentially, but I think that the jury's still going to be out on that one for a while.
That's pretty interesting. Um, yeah, I also wanted to speak on what you talked about with movement. So as a physio, I also I see a lot of patients with lower back pain, shoulder pain, just from sitting at the modern lifestyle of working at a desk, and they normally come in and say like, "How can I improve my posture?" And my answer is literally movement. You're just not moving enough, And I tell them like the best posture is the next one, So it's interesting how like movement not only helps the mental side of it, but pain and just physical like pain is can also be fixed by movement. So yeah, that was interesting that you brought that up. Yeah, so I wanted to touch on to the next question, which is, especially nowadays, I say the last 5 years, like everyone wants to be on TRT, everyone wants to be on like PEDs gear, like because I think it's the magic cure. It's like once I start injecting myself, like I'm going to be like the Rock, I'm going to be like the Arnold. Do you want to, as a hormone specialist, do you want to explain why that is not the case, and I guess explain why the mindset side of testosterone is like a massive component of like thriving when you're on it?
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject, and I often use Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, as an example, and I say that it doesn't matter how much testosterone you inject yourself with, it will not turn you into Dwayne Johnson. I'm sorry, but if we're going to look at someone like Dwayne Johnson for an example, as someone who is a very well built, strong alpha male, regardless of what people want to talk about PED use and so forth. If you look at someone like that who is just a successful, strong man, it's not just the testosterone that turned him into that. It was all the things that he did in combination with having that high testosterone foundation. And this is the part that I'm very much in two minds about this. And one of the reasons I like talking about this so much is that I don't have a vested interest in people going on TRT. A lot of the time when people are talking to TRT specialists or clinics, they have an incentive to sell you TRT because that's how they make their profit margin. That's how they make their commission. So I don't have a stake in it. And I truly believe that the vast majority of men in the world at the moment, not all, but the vast majority, would benefit from going on TRT. But there are so many caveats and so many things to take into consideration around TRT, which is why a lot of the time I end up talking people out of it because they haven't looked into these things. You are making a lifelong commitment and creating a acquired hormone deficiency, kind of like a type 1 diabetic, but for testosterone, for a substance which is one of the only, if not to my awareness, the only substance in the world which has been scientifically proven to make people less likely to follow rules. That's not going to be an easy thing to get on a global basis. I mean, there are countries in Eastern Europe where you can't even get a testosterone prescription. Period. There's nothing. So you're creating a lifelong dependency on a government controlled substance, which it is they're not going to make this any easier for people to get, and that's a huge factor that people need to consider. So there's a lot of the time when we're looking at should a guy or shouldn't a guy go on TRT, a lot of the time it's more logistical in terms of their concerns than it is a medical concern. So when we're looking at people's expectations around starting TRT, expectation management is crucial because a lot of the time the people who sell people their TRT programs don't mention the fact that, hey, you've actually got to go and do the fucking work now. And what TRT will do is it will make all the things that you should be doing that you haven't been doing actually work properly. So for example, if you take a guy who's hypergonadal, low testosterone young guy, and he goes, and follows kind of my recommendations on, things in terms of lifestyle. So he goes out and he does his training. He goes and does some martial arts. He tries to learn to meditate. He eats well. He pushes himself hard. A lot of the time, those situations are actually going to be more stressful than they are beneficial because he doesn't have the biological foundation to actually antagonize and balance out the stress of those situations. So that's when you find guys who, if they go into a caloric deficit, they lose muscle. And then if they go into a surplus, they get fat. They're the people who everything is just harder than it should be. And then what happens when you go on TRT is you're essentially rebuilding the foundation of the house. So you're stripping the house down. Let's say if you're a house, the house keeps falling down. You keep fixing the bathroom. It keeps falling apart because the foundation underneath the concrete slab is fucked. So what we're doing now is we're going, hey, we're putting that slab down now and we're fixing the foundation so it's perfect, but you've still got to go out and build that house. And the most difficult part of this psychologically for people is going, hey, you know that thing that you tried doing 10 times and it didn't work? Now you got to go do it again, but this time it will. And that is a very difficult thing for people to do when they've got years and years and years of learned fear because they have failed so many times. So it's giving them this understanding, which is not giving them permission to be a victim, but it's giving them this understanding of going, hey, I understand that you tried, and the fact that it didn't work wasn't from your lack of trying. It's because the foundation was fucked. We've fixed it, and now you need to go try again. That is hard, but it's also not spoken about. People don't say to people, and this is the thing that I've been drilling into my clients this year, is going, if you want to take your free testosterone levels up to the peak of what they should be for your genetic evolution as a human being, which is, let's say, 3 to 4 times higher than where they are now for someone who's hypergonadal, what you're doing is you have to go out and live and be the kind of man that would have those testosterone levels if you could. Because if you don't, if you continue to eat tons of junk food, be obese, drink, not move, and then you put a fuck ton of testosterone into your body, which it would be actively suppressing, even if it could make it, it's not going to work. The receptors aren't going to receive it. You're going to get a pro-inflammatory response. It's going to all metabolize wrong. And then that's when guys come and say, oh, I've got problems with estrogen. It's like, nah, dude, you're just fat. Or you've been unhealthy for so long that your body now has to metamorphosize and transition out of that. And that's something that takes time, effort, and work. It's a huge part of the conversation that people aren't having because it's not marketable. It's not an easy sell. So I've been on TRT now for 6 years, coming on 7, and I didn't work this shit out for the first few years. I felt markedly better on TRT than I used to, but it was only at the point where I was like, fuck, I actually have to work significantly harder than I am to actually get this to turn me into the man that I want to be. Because when you look at people's expectations around TRT, they're wanting to become a more masculine, androgenized version of themselves. That's what they want. That's the whole goal of what you want from testosterone, is to become a more androgenic, a more masculine version of you. And it's understanding and learning and going, I have to put my body into the position that it would be making this amount of testosterone if it could. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. And that's what you see in forums and in groups, is so many guys who haven't been educated on this specific point, is that, hey, you have to go out and do the work, but you also have to understand what the work is that needs to be done. So now when these guys go to the boxing class, yeah, it's still hard. Yeah, you still suck at boxing. I mean, testosterone doesn't teach you how to fight, but what it will do is it will make that experience more enjoyable to overcome. When you sit down and try to meditate, your mind will not naturally be at peace from going on TRT, but you will likely be less tormented by a stressed and anxious inner monologue because your neurochemistry has changed. So there's all these different factors that people need to be looking at when it comes to going, okay, if I want to be the best, strongest, most powerful version of myself as a man, I have to fix the hormone foundation, but then I actually have to go out and do all the things that the best version of myself would do. And when you're looking at all these guys, then it's so important to have a masculine male role model, is going, what habits, what did these guys do day in and day out for years to get to the point that they're at now? And it wasn't just walking through life doing the same shit that you did, sitting on the couch, jerking off all day, not doing any work. They didn't just do that and then become this man from having the low testosterone. But what the higher testosterone does is it does predispose you more to wanting to do these things. So I never wanted to learn martial arts when I had low testosterone, ever. And going on TRT didn't make me go, oh, fuck, I need to get into the boxing gym. But it definitely made it something that I was like, hey, I see the merit in this now. So it's like the testosterone kind of does push you forward and guide you to where you want to go. but you've still got to pull the trigger and do it yourself.
Man, I got chills listening to that because you've kind of like articulated what I've been experiencing, but I've never like thought about it I never thought about it. Like I've just been living it. Because just to give you some context, like um, 2021, like it was not the best year. Like things were a bit rough in 2021, but I've always had this mentality that like regardless of what's going on, I'll just push through. Like just. But it was shitty. It was always like it didn't feel good. And around the end of 2021, I decided to do the bodybuilding show. That's when I jumped onto like testosterone, and then it's almost like I feel like why I am in the place I am now, like a lot like happier, like I guess more successful in a way, is I was already doing the work, and then once I took testosterone, I kept doing what I was doing, and it went like exponential. It's crazy, and like um, I look forward to challenging. I can't wait for the next challenge in my life because I just know how much it will like help me grow. And these are like mindsets that I don't think I would have ever been able to tap in when I was not on testosterone, but it was like the basic underlyings of it were already there. So it's almost like a nature versus nurture kind of question. It's like which one is like did testosterone make me ambitious or did it not, or was I already ambitious? But it's almost like you have to have a bit of it, and then testosterone helps carry it and just what do you call it? Grows it exponentially. So yeah, that's really interesting. Do you think then? Well, I guess you kind of explained it, but do you think ambition and drive is something that every man or every person can unlock?
Can they? Yes. Will they? No. Um, when I was younger, um, I didn't have the best time at school, and the way that I would mentally, I guess, looking back on it now, self-soothe, but the way that I would distract myself was that I would listen to these songs and imagine myself performing them live. That was kind of a dream that I had. And what I didn't realize was that because I was doing this every night before I fell asleep or every time I was in the car listening to music, um, I manifested that into my reality. It didn't just make it fall into my lap, but I mean, I was driven to do that. And as soon as I got some momentum, like I joined my first band, I played my first show, that was all my ambition and drive was. And there's a video, I'll have to send it to you afterwards, but it's the last show we played. We did one show after I had my head injury, and it was in Jakarta. And it was professionally filmed. We're headlining a festival. And I remember walking out on that stage, like if you imagine like a festival style stage, like an outdoor one. And I walked out and, I saw all these people who knew all the words to our songs and they were cheering and they knew who we were. And I realized that that was the exact vision that I'd had my whole life in terms of what I'd wanted for music. And then I stopped as a singer after that show. I ended it on a high. Um, so that kind of stuff in terms of having a vision and having something that you feel is so important to you as a purpose is something that we can all have, regardless of our hormone levels. But the question is, will we? Because the world is so full of distractions. It's so full of things to make us, hedonistic or selfish or not working towards a higher purpose that I think it is very easy for people to go through life. And when I say easy, I mean it can happen, but I think it's also why so many people have mental health issues is that they don't have that purpose or drive or ambition that they're working towards. But my issue growing up, well, not issue, but something that I guess I dealt with looking back was that I was quite lazy. And I was lazy because I could be. I mean, I was just, I would pick things that were probably beneath me so that I didn't have to work as hard to achieve what I needed to achieve. So I didn't take the piss, but I just got away with not really applying myself because I was capable of doing some things that didn't really require a lot of work. And it wasn't until I was backed up against the wall in terms of actually facing my own mortality that I actually realized what I was capable of. And it was listening to the David Goggins podcast with Joe Rogan, the first one that ended up becoming his Can't Hurt Me book. I would listen to that on repeat while I was doing rehab to see what I could actually do. Like that inspired the fuck out of me because I identified so much with that in terms of someone that I never thought I was really capable of doing anything that was that difficult or overcoming things. And it wasn't until I was backed up against the wall where I was like, okay, now I have to do something hard that I don't love. Like getting to the point of playing music on a big stage, that was hard, but I loved it. Doing rehab was horrible, but it was either that or death. So it was there. I think men, and this is the point that I'm trying to make, is that I think you need a purpose and something that you feel is why you are here. Like, and people can take a religious approach with that, a spiritual approach with that, or just a general mental health approach of you have to have something that you're doing that you're working towards that makes you proud. But I also think that we all need a rite of passage, which has been completely removed from culture. I often make the joke that the rite of passage used to be, go out into the forest naked for a week and bring back a kill, and if you don't, then you're not welcome to be part of the tribe. We've replaced now with a sweet 16, where you get a car for your 16th birthday. Complete opposite. But I think we all need something as a defining point in our life as men, and I think that you're going to get it inevitably. Is you need something that tests your limits, that really makes you look death in the eye. Look your fears and look your insecurities in the eye and go, hey, what am I actually made of? Like, what can I actually do when my life is on the line, or when something that crucial is on the line? And I think that if you haven't gone through something like that that truly tests your resolve of what you can face and overcome, then everything else in life will seem a lot more difficult than it is. Because when I look at things now that I don't want to do, like I'm not someone who likes doing admin work. I'm not someone who likes cleaning and tidying. I'm not someone who, I have small things that I struggle with, day to day, just like anyone else. But now when I look at that, I go, this is all so easy compared to what I have done and overcome and been through. And that was what was so important for me, to be able to unlock that motivation and ambition and drive. Because I was in a situation where I could say, I am now more resilient to stress. I am now able to pick things that are difficult and hard and go, you know what? Yeah, that is difficult and hard, but I've done harder shit and this is worth the work and effort. And I think a lot of guys just don't have that thing that they have pushed themselves truly beyond what they ever thought they were capable of, to be able to apply that resilience into making goals and overcoming goals. And I think that we all have so much potential. And this is what I spoke about at Ali's conference. And I know that other people have said a very similar thing. So I'm not parroting, I'm echoing what other people have said. Is that, like, you and I are having this conversation. People who are listening to this podcast now are listening because we are the dominant bloodline. Like, every other bloodline died, like famine, adversity, every battle ever. Like, the bloodline that made it through literally won 100% of the challenges. And that's why we're all here now. So if people are going, oh, my depression is genetic, no, it's not. Like, you are the most capable, and we're also, as human beings, we're the apex predators of nature. So you're at the top of the food chain, you're the dominant bloodline, and if you look through history, there has been some fucked up shit that people have gone through and got through it, and that's why you're here today. So if you think that your problems are genetic, then the fact that you can't get out of bed and go to work and face the day, it's not genetic. Yes, there may be environmental factors. There may be some fucked up traumas that you've been through. Everyone has got their shit. But you do have the foundation and the coding and the blueprint to be able to overcome that. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. And it doesn't mean it's going to be good. But, like, what else are you going to do? Like, what are your choices? So I think that if people can look into themselves and actually, you know, give themselves that credit where credit is due and go, I can do this. I just need to try harder, or I'm not where I want to be now, but I could be. That's all people need. And sometimes it's just someone saying the right thing that gets under your skin and makes you hear something right. For me, and I'm sure heaps of people don't like him, but I fucking love the work that Andrew Tate puts out in terms of, like, speaking about this kind of stuff, is Sometimes you just need someone to say the right thing that unlocks that fire inside you, that burning passion or that desire to go look at yourself and go, I'm not proud of where I'm at now. I feel guilty because I'm lazy. And instead of numbing that signal or running from that signal, it's looking at it, taking responsibility and going, okay, how can I fix and overcome this? And I think that the cure to that for men is like it's forward momentum. If you're moving forward towards a goal, that is one of the most powerful cures for depression because you're not stagnant. So even if you're not where you want to be, as long as you're further towards that than where you were yesterday, it's like that is the cure for so many men's depression is moving forward. And when I was doing rehab, when I was making progress, I was dark, I was miserable, I was dealing with some fucking trauma, but I was not depressed, I was driven. So I think we all do have the potential, but I don't think a lot of people will unlock it because I think a lot of people will shy away from stepping up to the plate and swinging at that challenge when it does show up in life. And I think one of the reasons why people don't swing is because they might have that low testosterone foundation. And that's what I think is very sad. And that's why it's both, right? It's nature and nurture. And that's where some guys have to take a step back and go, okay, the testosterone is not going to be the panacea for fixing my life, but it may be the catalyst that I need to be able to fix my life. And that's what it was for me.
Two things. Um, every single guest I've had so far, it has. So my podcast is all about 90 everything. So it's all about maximizing, like being the best you can be. So all of my guests have been reflective of that, and every single one of my guests has gone through a adversity early in their life, and I think that is so fascinating because it's like um, it's a accidental rite of passage. Um, do you, I guess, do you think it is? Do you think someone can be at their potential without a rite of passage? Can you just learn from someone else, or do you have to experience it?
I think, I don't know. I'm the same as you. I don't think I've really met anyone who is kicking ass and doing this kind of stuff who hasn't been through something difficult. I think what that rite of passage is can look very different for different people, but I think that we have I think stress resilience is something that has to be learned. And I think that the way that the mind works is that like the brain is blind. So if you've never been through anything difficult in your life, then what, like, paying the bills or having a late mortgage payment or your girlfriend breaking up with you, that might subjectively be the hardest thing that you've ever gone through. So the brain is going to have a stress hormone cascade that is relative to your subjective experience, not your objective experience. So if you've been through more hard shit, other things are going to seem less stressful and you're going to have less of a stress response. And then I think you're going to be more driven to taking on bigger challenges and overcoming things. So I think that, like, maybe you don't necessarily have to go through a big rite of passage if you've been well fathered and well raised to be able to have exposure to stress and those kind of things when you're growing up. But I think the modern world allows so much softness and so many creature comforts and so many luxuries that I think realistically for most people, and I'm sure there's always going to be exceptions to the rule, but I think most people, I think most people do need that real challenge and hardship to overcome to put things into perspective as well. And I think that the perspective is very important too, because when you go through things that are difficult, like an analogy I often explain to guys is like, if you walk outside and get hit by a bus, you're going to learn a couple of things. One, look both ways before you cross the street. Two, getting hit by a bus hurts. That's the natural things you're going to learn from that. But what else are you going to learn? You're going to learn the fragility of human life. You're going to learn the importance of your relationships, the importance of expressing your gratitude and love for the people because you know that you might not be here tomorrow. You're going to learn the importance of showing up in the world in a way that your life may be taken from you tomorrow. So what you do today counts. those things are not things that you naturally learn from high velocity impact. They're things that you learn from going through an experience where you are faced with your own mortality. So I'm sure that you can learn those lessons other ways, but the question is, will you? Like, and that's the thing with men, and that's why I love working with men, is because like men are so interesting to work with, and a lot of the time as dudes, we don't learn the lesson unless we get it very, very aggressively and we get hit with it very hard. The analogy I often explain to people is like, if I've got a hot stove and say to a woman, don't touch the stove, it's hot, she's not going to touch it. If I say to a dude, don't touch the stove, it's hot, the thought process is it hot? Is it actually hot? Maybe I can touch it. Maybe he's a pussy and he thinks it's hot and I don't. And a lot of the time, you do need to touch the stove to learn that it's hot and then not do it again. But if you keep touching that fucking stove and burning yourself, you're a dumbass. But that's the thing with dudes, is a lot of the time we need to learn from doing. We can be kinesthetic learners. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing bad about that. But that's what life is about for us, and that's what it's always been. Life has always been overcoming adversity. So the big thing for me when I went through this challenge that I went through is that, you know, I had a couple of attempts on my own life because I'd been told that it wasn't going to get any better. So I was like, fuck this, I can't keep doing this. And that's a very difficult thing to actually go through and do, which is why I failed at it. And when I went to, at one point where I was basically, you know, looking to really kind of, you know, check out, I had this experience where I had a very, very strong dose of psilocybin with a shaman in a context of a therapeutic session, and it was shortly after I'd started testosterone. And my intention was really just to have a very powerful experience before I left. But what it ended up being was, I rose out of my body and I looked down at myself. And speaking of Dwayne Johnson before, I'd been watching, I can't remember what movie it was. It was either Skyscraper or San Andreas. It was one of those movies where The Rock just basically fucks shit up because he's a big black Samoan dude. And I think I was watching, I think it was San Andreas I was watching on the plane. I rose out of my body and I looked down at myself. And at this point, I was, I guess, my true self. I had all this wisdom and power, and I was looking down at my ego. And the thing that bothered me the most was what I said to myself, which was that the best single piece of tough love that I've ever been able to communicate was that if you check out now, Dwayne Johnson would never play you in a movie. And that bothered me. It bothered me so much that if I was going to give up and not fight back, that I wasn't going to leave a story worth telling. And that made me embarrassed and ashamed. And so I saw that opportunity. It completely reframed this opportunity in my mind to go, what can I do with this? And how hard can I swing at this to see what I am made of? Because now I have this opportunity. So when I reframe that in my mind as this opportunity to see what I could do and what I was made of, I just wanted to go down swinging. And that was such a powerful thing, is that I at that point I legitimately did not think it was recoverable, and everyone had told me that it wasn't. But I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna try, and I'm just going to try with raw aggression and velocity and force. So I got rehab exercises that I was meant to do for an hour a day. I did them for 10 every single day. I'd go down to this oval near my house. So when I started doing these exercises, it was just like eye training. And then it progressed to the point where I'd be like, you know, jogging with my eyes closed or jogging and doing a 360 spin. And I would just be down there just like a madman all day doing these exercises, vomiting, coming home, a lot of the time getting home and emotionally breaking down because I was just fucked. And I just did that day in, day out, day in, day out, because I just wanted to try. And that experience, like when I look back on that, I don't remember a lot of it. A lot of it was just a one foot in front of the other. It just felt like a nightmare. But as I am now the guy who went through that, I am now so much more progressed in my own maturity and development as a man than I ever could have been before, which is why I'm so grateful for what I went through, because it led me on this path to where I am now. So it's all about looking at things and going, did this happen to me or did this happen for me? And there's this saying that, God gives his greatest challenges to his strongest warriors. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. You've just got to brainwash yourself and convince yourself that that's real. Because if you can frame things like that, that story actually serves you. Whereas if you frame it as this is just bullshit circumstances and bad luck and it happened to me, which a lot of the time it is, that story doesn't help. That doesn't help you at all. So there's so much that you learn about yourself and about what you're capable of when you're faced with these incomprehensible bullshit challenges that bring you to your knees. And being the person who got through that, and it's why I love encouraging guys to go and learn martial arts. And I say the most beneficial time in learning martial arts is going to your second class, because the first class you went and you sucked, you realized that you sucked, you might have vomited and it was brutal, and then you went back. You're the guy who went back. You went back to the hard, difficult place that made you feel insecure, that made you feel vulnerable. You might have got hurt, and you still chose to go back and do that, even though you didn't have to. You don't have to learn how to fight. No one's making you. And then not only did you do that, but you're there with a group of other people doing the same thing. Being that person, even if you're not a good fighter at the end of it, I'm an awful Muay Thai fighter. I'm way too big to fight Muay Thai, but I still do it because I love having everything that gives me in terms of still going back and still go. Like, I could just go to the gym and lift weights and it would be 30% as difficult and I'd still get benefits. But I choose to go and do the thing that I suck at that is super challenging because of how that applies to other aspects of my life. And I personally, I don't know how I would be motivated and driven and capable of doing other things if I didn't do that.
I have like three things to kind of parrot on from there. Um, the power of perspective, right? So you kind of touched on like we literally are bred from the ancestors who survived. We're like the top genetics. We've survived all these centuries of hardship and like famine, destruction, and wars. And it's like I feel like for any guy who's struggling and wants to just give up, it's like that is the biggest like fuck you to your ancestors who just did all this work for you to just be like, oh, like she broke up with me and I want to give up, or like, oh, works hard. It's just like it puts things into perspective, right? Um, Another thing you mentioned was just like I think I also agree, and this is something I've been thinking about is a fundamental difference for I think male and female psychology is that like I think maybe talking is helpful for men, but you have to have action. Like you cannot overcome like mental health issues if you just talk about it. And I think that's the difference between men and women. Like women, I think I've always I don't know where I got this from, but like back in the day, like women would work together and like pick berries together while men stood side by side and went into war together. Like men always didn't talk, they'd put action, and women would like communicate and that's why women tend to be like higher EQ and like more nurturing. It's like I don't know how much of this is true, but just it's just interesting because if only there was some mental health program where it was just like just do something hard and see how you feel after, versus just seeing a psychologist and just talking to them about your problems. Um, and yeah, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like, I think that there's a time and place for talk therapy, but talk therapy is to help you understand what you need to do. But beyond that, it's like, how is talking about how you're feeling going to make it any better? If anything, it might actually make it worse because now you're just sitting around and feeling even worse about the situation. You're not going out and changing it. And one example that I give for this that I think is the best example is rape trauma. If you've got someone who's been raped and they're traumatized by it, talking about it and bringing it up all the time, that might not help. But you know what does help? Learning Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. If you can learn how to fucking execute someone who is bigger than you when they're on top of you and you're in a compromised position, if you can learn that skill and go through and put yourself in situations where you're getting pinned back down in a safe environment and then you can overcome that, that's how you overcome the trauma. So it's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this yin and yang. So I used to teach meditation before I did this. And I'm so passionate about the yin and yang of martial arts and meditation because, and it's why I'm so big on striking based martial arts for most traumas that men have, because if you've got issues around, your self-esteem, fear, learned failure, insecurities, if you just go out and just learn to strike, learn to be on the offensive, learn to attack and master violence, that isn't going to undo anything that's happened in the past, but neither is anything else. So what that will do is you're showing up now, you're going out and you're actually learning to go on the offensive. And if you're struggling with confidence, learning and knowing, walking through the world and at least having some capacity for violence completely changes the way that you walk through the world because you're not afraid anymore. And it's so important to do that. But then on the other side of it, and it's why I love boxing and Muay Thai classes so much, is that like if we're in a class together, then we'd swap and I'd hold the pads for you. So now, like if you're doing a combo, like a jab cross low kick combo, for example, I have to move my pads with you. So you're going to give me 2 punches and I have to move my pads down to block the kick. So now I'm in a situation where I'm on the receiving end of velocity and power. It's not going to hurt me, but it's still in a situation that's high stress. But I have to learn to follow your movements and keep cool, calm, and collected because otherwise you're going to blow up my leg if I don't move the pads down. So now you're learning a skill to actually be present and be in control when you're on the receiving end of velocity. That's huge as well. And then if you can sit down at the end of all that, get into a dark room and go within and learn to manage your own mind, learn to escape the rabbit holes that your mind takes you down and choose what you want to focus your attention on, being the present moment. Those two things together, learning to manage your stress response and then learning to go out in the world and actually be a confident, capable man who is capable of physical protection, that is, it's not going to fix all your problems, but it's going to give you the foundational skills that you need to overcome whatever you're dealing with. And it's why I say when guys go, "Oh, can you recommend me to a therapist?" I go, "Yeah, you want to go and work with that boxing coach." Because now if you do one-on-one, you've got a male mentor who's teaching you how to fight, which all your ancestors had. That's how they got here. So you've got the most primal, primitive male coach who is teaching you important life skills. But you've also got someone who you're inevitably going to talk to because when you're between rounds and you got 30 seconds of rest, you're going to talk his ear off to try to drag out that clock. So now you've got someone to talk to, someone who cares about you, but someone who's also going to put you into a safe space where you can actually exchange blows and exchange violence and still walk out of there unscathed. And that is such a powerful form of therapy because it's like what I said before about the bus. It's experiential therapy. You're learning to overcome, you're learning to see what you're capable of, and you're learning important skills. And what you take from that will often make the shit that used to bother you less significant because now you've got, like when you're in the ring and when you're, either holding pads or sparring or whatever, you're not thinking about that shit. You've got an escape from that because now you've got real problems. Someone's trying to knock you out. You've got a real problem to deal with. And that can also, as you said before about perspective, that can put things in perspective because we always create problems. We always create drama. Humans will always find something to whinge about and something to bitch about and something to not be grateful about their lives for. So if you can go out and do something like that, it puts all that other smaller stuff completely into perspective.
Wes Watson's talked about that, like in terms of like hardcore, like intense training. He was like, show me someone who's done 100 burpees and is depressed during it. So he says it's impossible, So yeah, that's really interesting. I guess the added element is like someone's actually trying to hit you. But when you were talking about that, it also just made me think of extrapolating like offense and defense into like, because these days we can't really just hit people, like we have to. Yeah, we live in a more civilized society. So I would say nowadays we fight with our words and we defend with our words, right? Mm-hmm. And I think you can extrapolate that with what you were saying with words. It's like being able to be on the offense with words, like challenging people, healthy confrontation, like standing up for yourself, assertiveness. And then on the defense, it's like if someone's like screaming at you, being able to like be present, like be in control of your emotions, and like be able to deal with that and not get like completely overwhelmed and like have your like CNS completely like fucked up, you know. So I think it's crazy. It's like martial arts has like physical and I'm sure everyone who's done it has like probably experienced it. Like a lot of it is also, I guess, just mental gains and just things that you can just put into your own life, you know. So yeah, very interesting. Um, so you were talking about distractions before, and I think this segues into our next question, which is in today's, I guess, healthcare space, and I guess health optimization, wellness, whatever you call it. People are always looking to add in the new supplement, the new workout routine, the new food, superfood, antioxidant, whatever, you know. What's some stuff that we can stop doing or take out of our lifestyle to improve our hormone/health?
That's a good question. And yeah, you're completely right. It's a lot of the time when I'm working with clients on what's going on with them, it's more about taking things out or cutting things out as opposed to adding in certain things. So if someone needs something, like if you need testosterone or if you need thyroid or pregnenolone or DHEA or something like that, you need that for sure. But what you don't need is a whole bunch of herbs and pill bottles and bullshit off iHerb or other bullshit that influencers are selling with affiliate codes. You may benefit from it. I think there's probably 100 supplements people could take that you'd get benefit from, but would you get an ROI from it? Probably not. So yeah, you're completely correct. And in my experience, the biggest thing that is holding people back in Australia is casual alcoholism. People don't realize that you can't go out and drink 10 standard drinks every Saturday night and be healthy. Your mate might be able to, but you might not get away with that. And that's the most fascinating thing about working with guys on their blood work is looking at their bloods and going, so tell me about drugs and alcohol. And they go, oh, yeah, I don't really drink very much. I'm like, what does that mean? And they go, oh, yeah, I just have, you know, a six pack on a Friday night and then maybe two six packs on a Saturday night, but, not much. It's a cultural thing. And a lot of the time, guys will have, their mates and their groups around them, and that's just been part of your lifestyle. It's what you've been doing since you were 18, going out on a Saturday night and binge drinking. And people may not think it's binge drinking because they're not blacking out and vomiting. But if you're getting to the point of inebriation and intoxication with alcohol, you can't live and have a healthy life if you're getting to that point. So I think alcohol is the biggest factor. And if you're someone who loves your craft beers or you love your whiskey or you love your red wine, you can still have that in moderation. But what people perceive as moderation is a lot of the time binge drinking. And while some people might get away with it and have perfect blood work, having, three whiskeys, 2 or 3 nights a week, other guys will develop alcoholic fatty liver disease from that. And that's just the way it is. And that can be a very hard pill for people to swallow because they don't see it as a problem. But then they can also sit back and recognize and go, hey, I'm not doing well. I've got these issues where I'm looking to make an intervention. And a lot of the time, people will look for something that will allow them to get away with the shit that's causing the problem in the first place. So, casual alcoholism is something that I've learned a lot of things working in this field, especially so like last year for winter, I was in Vilnius and I was basically completely locked down. So I couldn't even get a takeaway coffee, couldn't go to a supermarket, nothing, all for all of winter. And I was in an apartment. So that was when I just basically went, okay, well, I'm just going to take on a bunch of clients because I don't have anything else to do. So that was one of the most fascinating periods because I basically doubled my workload. But when you double your workload, you double the amount of people that you can pick up trends for. And that was one thing that I didn't realize would be such a big thing. But it's because people just haven't been educated properly around going, hey, you actually can't get away with this and be in optimal health. You might be able to get away with it and not die. But can you thrive and be healthy and actually have your TRT work properly if you're burdening your liver with 10 standard drinks every 7 days? Probably not.
So it's funny you mentioned this because I haven't drank alcohol in a while. I'd say almost like 6 months. And that's largely because of my competition bodybuilding prep, right? Just it didn't make sense to drink or consume something that would affect protein synthesis or just affect overall like a fatigue management, right? And I found over time I didn't miss it at all because I just felt so good. And two key people that I would say have played a role in me just completely just quitting. Like I don't know if you call it quit. It's just like I just don't drink anymore because I have no interest in it. Because I'm also in the pursuit of maximizing my potential. And what's the point of taking a substance that is handicapping me? Like it's already hard enough to try and go for these crazy goals. Like, why add extra shit to that plate, right? But the two people are Huberman, which I know is controversial, but that Huberman podcast about alcohol was like mind blowing. Like, just it's one drink is enough to fuck you up, you know. And I think that just showed me like, what's the point? Like, because before I was like, all right, we'll just have a drink and not get really drunk. But when I found out it's just one drink would fuck you, I was like, what's even the point there, right? And the second one was Wes Watson, and um, he said the same thing. It's like, why consume something that's going to like lower your vibration? It's like if you want to be the person who is selfless and helping others, to be able to do that, you would not consume something that would like, pull you down. So yeah, those two individuals have really, I guess, cemented my decision in not consuming alcohol. And yeah, I really don't miss it because I just feel better. You don't have no hangovers. Um, like everything's legit just better without. Well, in my eyes, because also a lot of the people that you hang out with are only connected to you by alcohol. You know, and it's like if alcohol was not there, who are they to you? Do they still bring any value to your life? You know, so um, yeah. Would you have anything to say about that?
Completely, yeah, 100%. It's so when I was doing music, you can't. Well, I'm sure some people can. I could never drink before playing drums because you lose your timing. Like you couldn't do it. But as a screaming vocalist who would only perform for half the song, you could get pretty hammered on stage. And if anything, having three, four, five standard drinks before going on stage made me a much better and more confident frontman. And a lot of people, I mean, and you end up destroying your voice over time because you don't use proper technique. But alcohol and, I was in, I guess the genre of music is called post-hardcore, but like rock and roll music and alcohol go hand in hand. So I was very into that for a while. And it wasn't until I had this really, really cool point in my life where, I mean, so when I was 17, 18, 19, I mean, I'm 6'1". I would have been about 62, 63 kilos, stick thin, big fringe, eyeliner, the whole works. That was my shtick. And I would still go to the gym, but like I hadn't really had anyone teach me properly. So I'd go and I'd do a bit on the elliptical, bit on the rowing machine, full body circuit on the machines, just to basically not be fat, essentially. Um, and I joined a new gym when I was like 20, 21, and my childhood neighbor and best friend from my childhood was training there, and he'd gotten fucking huge, like huge. So he took me under his wing and taught me how to train. And then he introduced me to now one of my best friends, his name Cam, who was a personal trainer there as well. So he was, I was 20, I think he was like 26, 27. And we were just the most unlikely three amigos. It was these two jacked, sporty, super fit dudes, and then this just emo singer dude who could, barely even bench his body weight. But they taught me so much, and what they taught me, they were like, why are you going out and drinking and getting habit on the weekend, like, and then you're skipping the gym on Monday? Like, I was letting them down, and I wanted them to respect me. I respected them. They were my mentors, and I wanted them to respect me. So as I kind of looked around and went, okay, well, these people who I'm going out and drinking with, they're not really progressing or doing anything, whereas these guys who don't go out and drink and party, they're actually living a much better quality of life, and they have better values and principles and standards than the people who I'm going out and getting hammered with every weekend. So even when I was still in music, I didn't touch a drop of alcohol for like a good couple of years at that point. I just completely cold turkeyed it. And then as a result, what you find, and this is something that I often say to people, especially around like, recreational party drugs, I say, are you going out to that venue and taking drugs to have a good time? Or are you drinking and taking drugs because if you go there sober, it's fucking horrible? And that was the if you want to have a wake up call about how ugly drunk people are. So I DJ'd at this alternative nightclub for like a year and a half, and I would do it completely sober because I had training in university the next day, and just watching drunk people every week all night, particularly the people who were still there at 1, 2, 3 in the morning on a weeknight. Fuck man, if that doesn't give you a wake up call not to drink, nothing else will. But the most important thing for me was when I was younger, having accountability for not drinking and having people who I respected who were proud of me for not doing that. It was so important and so integral for me. So it's very important to look around at the people that you're with. They say that you're the product of your 5 closest friends, and going, is this serving me? And if you're, one thing that I see is guys who've spent every weekend from 18 to their early 30s going out, spending hundreds of dollars, getting hammered, basically just wasting all their spare time on the weekend. And then they don't have any savings, they don't have any assets, they haven't progressed, psychologically, emotional maturity, spiritually, anything like that. And you look at them and you go, do I respect these people? Are these people worthy of my respect? And as I said, I think you can still have, if you, I don't like alcohol either. I don't really like the taste of it, and I don't really like the effects. I think there are far better drugs that people could use. But I really like what Wes Watson, the quote that you made from Wes, in terms of it's lowering your vibrational frequency. And it's one of the reasons why I ended up having a transition into psychedelic therapies, was that way you can have an experience. Because I think at the other side of this is that we want to alter our consciousness. It's why humans like drugs. It's why we like experiences. We are all driven to alter our consciousness. If you can utilize practices that will actually increase your vibrational frequency, increase your emotional awareness, your self-awareness, your awareness around how you treat yourself and others, which is huge, then that way you can actually have a positive progression forward with what you're using to alter your consciousness, rather than essentially drinking a very toxic, not so fun poison that makes you feel like shit the next day.
Couldn't agree more. And this is a perfect segue to the next question. Um, so you mentioned before with the getting hit by a bus scenario, where when you go through something, it kind of expands your consciousness in a way. Like, I guess you learn new things. And I guess psychedelics is pretty much something that can do that for a lot of people too. And as you mentioned, there's a difference between recreational party drugs that are commonly used to distract and, I guess, like suppress negative emotions. But can you kind of talk about how psychedelic? Because I feel like it's like people like Joe Rogan and like what do you call Aubrey Marcus, they're starting to create, I guess, more conversation about psychedelics, and I think stigma around it is starting to reduce. Like Joe Rogan said this in a podcast recently. He said that they gave like a bunch of people LSD, and like almost I think 81% of them rated it as their top 3 events in their life, and like the other 2 were like marriage and having a kid. So uh, what is your thoughts on psychedelics and helping individuals? And yeah, I guess that's the main question.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you say it was marriage and having kids, because what you're looking at in situations like that is that when you're getting married, I imagine, or your kids being born, I imagine, or other events like surfing a big wave, or like doing a big jump on a skateboard, there's situations where you are the situation that you're in is so powerful that you're in the present moment. Like if you're up there getting married, you're not thinking about anything else. When you're watching human life enter the world, you're not thinking, "Oh, did I leave the stove on? Do I look fat in this shirt?" You're right there and present. So psychedelics are they're teachers. I when we look at different classes of drugs, you've got stuff like opioids and alcohol, which would be dissociatives. Psychedelics are the opposite of that. So they magnify your conscious experience. And there are different types of psychedelics which can be used for different things. But my very strong interest in psychedelic therapy based off my experience, which was the combination of a breakthrough experience with TRT underneath, is the TRT and then all the stuff that we talked about before. We're looking at healing the physical vessel and then how that as a result impacts the consciousness. So if you've got someone who's, for example, you're a physio, right? So chronic pain, low testosterone, shitty diet, and fix their movement patterns, you fix their testosterone, you fix their diet, psychologically they're going to feel better from the feedback from the vessel into the mind. Psychedelics is the other way around. So we're focusing directly on the mind and then it's the feedback in the body. So psychedelic therapy, in my opinion, is not something that is for everyone. It is high risk, high reward. And that's the important thing to preface with. And I think that it's very important for people who are working with these medicines, which I've had the privilege of doing a number of times, is you can't push people towards them, but you can open the door. You can go, hey, this is an option. You shouldn't, I'm not pushing you to do it, but if it's the right thing for you, it's something to look into. And different psychedelics offer different experiences. And a lot of the time it comes down to the dose and the magnitude of the experience. So you've got something everywhere from like ketamine infusions or a microdose period of psilocybin, let's say 30 days of microdosing psilocybin, all the way up to like experiences with like ayahuasca, 5-MeO DMT, very powerful, very, very powerful experiences, which will completely redefine and create experiences that, like getting hit by the bus, completely change the way that you feel. And I'm very interested in DMT in particular, because for those who don't know, ayahuasca is a combination of two ingredients that essentially will make DMT orally bioavailable. So it creates a longer, slower, sustained DMT experience with other plant compounds that basically cause you to have an altered state. So one of the most powerful experiences I had with ayahuasca, which is I've had a lot of very powerful experiences, but my favorite one was the first ceremony I did, and it was a very interesting ceremony because I had a amazing, powerful, beautiful, blissful experience where completely redefined my perception of life and God and all that kind of stuff. Just if you imagine like the quintessential perfect psychedelic experience, that's what I had. Everyone else in the room was just fucking puking, just darkness, just chaos. And I had this really beautiful experience. So I came out of it. And as the medicine was kind of wearing off, so for those who aren't aware with ayahuasca, it will basically hit you like a freight train and then it drops off very quickly. So it's very interesting how it works compared to something like LSD, which is more of like a gradual fade out. So when this medicine was wearing off and it was kind of in this transition period, I was surrounded at the time by a few people who were very close to me. And they were having, just the loudest vomiting that I'd ever heard in my life. Like if you imagine someone like dry wrenching their stomach acid up from drinking too much booze, imagine that times 100. It was just chaos in the room. So my initial knee-jerk reaction was, I'm going to go and sit out on the balcony and look up at the stars and enjoy some peace and quiet while I'm still in this afterglow. And what I recognized in doing that, when I was able to look at myself and look at the experience I was having, was going, if I get up and leave, I'm sending the signal to these people who I genuinely care about that what they're going through is not okay, and and I am not facilitating and supporting them going through what they're experiencing. So why should I leave and do that? And how do I think that this is going to be a better experience? And as someone who, like, I'm an only child. I had two very busy working parents growing up. They loved me and supported me, but I spent a lot of time on my own. So that was just kind of my knee-jerk reaction, was go and be on your own and enjoy this experience. But instead, what I did is I stayed and I did this practice called holding space, where I basically just meditated and was at peace while everyone around me was going through what they went through. And the joy and satisfaction that I got from supporting these people going through what they needed to go through was so much more powerful than what I would have experienced just going outside and looking at the stars, because I was showing up with love and acceptance of the people who I cared about going through their shit. And that was such an important experience for me, because what that taught me, without getting too esoteric and airy fairy, is when we look at our relationships with others, we generally think of love as something that you give someone and then they love you back. You say, I love you, they say, I love you too. And what that taught me was that you can only receive love while you are actively giving it. So you can only open that pathway in while you've got that pathway going out. So if I'm in this space with people and I am loving and supporting them and they're loving and supporting me too in appreciation, that experience with other people is much more powerful and beneficial than any experience that you can have on your own, because we are tribal animals. We are meant to be connected with our communities. So that there's lessons that you learn like that from the experiences that you have that are what transcend the experience and then apply outside of the ayahuasca or whatever medicine you're using. So these ceremonies that you have, or these visions that you have, or whatever psychedelics you're working with, what you experience in the medicine itself is important, but it's what you take from that and how you apply it to the world after it's done. And so many people, when they're looking at psychedelics, they only value the experience they have with the medicine, not what they take from that outside. So ayahuasca has shown me the importance of having loving relationships. It's also taught me the importance of showing up and being a leader, emotionally leading with love in the right setting. It's taught me how to it's taught me where I was blocked in a lot of ways in terms of not actually expressing and being confident with my masculinity. Um, and it also taught me a lot of ways that I wasn't looking after myself properly. I had one ceremony, which you'll appreciate this as a physio. I had all this tension and migraine through the back of my neck with this pain that I've been dealing with for a long time. And I was in this space where the ayahuasca was very strong and I was in a lot of pain, and it's a bad combination. Um, and I had this experience where I just felt so compelled to basically get into a child's pose with my knees apart and stretch out my adductors and my groin and my hips. And that taught me and went, hey, dude, like all this tension up here, it's coming from your hips. And that's something that I've been trying to resolve for weeks and months and even years at that point. And then all it took was this medicine experience to go, hey, dude, there's a lot of tension in your hips that you're not paying attention to, and it's related. Um, that's how I learned to fix my body. So there's all these lessons and teachings that you get from these medicines. And it's why it's so important that people view these as teachers. And the idea, in my opinion, of utilizing psychedelics for positive learning is you sit with the medicine, music, ideally a facilitator, and you have this internal experience. You get your homework, you get your lessons, you go out, you do the work, and then once you finish that work, you finish that chapter, that's when you come back and learn again. It's when people just keep coming back to the medicine to try to learn the same lessons over and over again that you can have a unhealthy and unproductive relationship with these kind of medicines.
I have three things to bounce off from what you just said. Um, First of all, is I also like not to look too deep into it, but like the child's pose is also very. It's a very like the position is a like very an act of like surrender, right? It's like you're almost bowing and like on your knees kind of thing. I'm just wondering like how it's almost like you're letting go and giving into what the medicine can help you with. So I thought that's and because that's something I've always experienced. Like whenever I use psychedelics, it's always like accept, let it go, accept. The more you resist, the more hard it gets. The other thing I was going to say was you kind of touched on it, but do you think you can do too much LSD? I feel like some people that I know who've done it too much, like the sense of reality is fragmented. They're like ultra hippie, but not even ultra hippie. Just like well, I guess that's what it is, right? There's no groundedness into reality, and they're just kind of like yeah, it's all good, man, like kind of thing. Where do you think the line is for the use of psychedelics?
Yeah, and that's a big one. It's one of the reasons I don't personally work with LSD because it's a synthetic compound. I only work with the natural psychedelics because I have seen that excessive use of the synthetic psychedelics to be more harmful than excessive use of the more natural psychedelics. And the reason why I like DMT based molecules so much is that if we look at meditation, we have the mind and we have the observer. So we have the true self and we have the egoic monkey mind, the consciousness, the thoughts. And I believe, based off my experience and my research, that the experiences that we have with DMT are actually experienced by the true self. And that's why you have to surrender and be present and meditate through it to have these visions and these experiences. And then when you overanalyze things and you start to get all up in your head, then that's when the experience will derail. But I think you're completely correct. I think they can be overdone. And I think that that's why intention is so important, because the whole purpose of these teachers and using these medicines productively is to enrich the experiences that we have in the real world. And one of my favorite, if you like Northlane, one of my favorite lines is from what is it? Transcending Dimensions, off the first album, which is cast aside your fear of reality and face the fucking world. And that to me is
The breakdown.
that. Yeah. That's such a good breakdown. But that line, so many people need to just hear that again and again and again and again, because when we're looking at disassociatives, when we're looking at excessive use of intoxicants, a lot of the time it is coming down to fear of reality and the inability to actually face the world and face yourself in a sober mindset. And if someone is using LSD or using psychedelics to the point that it's actually removing them from reality and making them less grounded, then that's the complete opposite intention of what actually the intention around the medicine should be. So I think that absolutely you can overdo it. And I've seen firsthand people who have had their lives. I've also seen people become quite pseudo spiritual. I've seen people become delusional. I've seen people who have lost connection with the way that the world actually works, because one of the most difficult things about having profound experiences with psychedelics is how do you find meaning and purpose, and how to talk to people about what you experienced and integrate it in a world which is so far removed from what you experience. I mean, if you go to if you have a very profound ayahuasca experience and you leave this reality and you experience all these amazing godly feelings of love and connectedness with the universe and collective consciousness and all these different things, and then you go back out into a traffic jam where everyone's swearing and yelling and beeping their horns and people are treating one another like crap, that can be a very jarring whiplash kind of experience. And I think that some people, rather than being able to integrate this world positively and working with it, they go, oh, I'd rather just spend more time over here. And I get that. But at the end of the day, this is the world that you actually have to show up and live in and be in, because this is the timeline that we were born in. So it's very important that people don't lose their grip on reality and can actually have a self-regulation and awareness around this to go, is this actually serving me, and what is the purpose that I'm actually using this medicine for?
it it's pretty much just like, are we using this medicinally and like for like, I guess, healthy transformation versus like recreation, right? That's the way I
And
see it.
and that's why I like ayahuasca, because ayahuasca is a lot less fun than LSD. So
Interesting.
that's why I think there's so much, like, when I roll into to doing work with ayahuasca, there's excitement, but it's not like oh yeah, this is going to be fun, I'm looking forward to this. It's like, here we fucking go again. Like, we're here to do the work. Um,
Ah,
and that's why I like that form of medicine, because it's not addictive. Like, every single time I've drank ayahuasca, at the end of it, I go, I am never doing that again. I often have thoughts in the middle of ceremony being like, why did I do this to myself again? But it's always such a profound thing to do. But when it comes to something like cannabis, which I still class as a psychedelic, I think because it's more accessible, you can function more on it day to day. There is more of that capacity to be able to, I guess, abuse the drug. Then yeah, I think it can lead people down that road. So I think that is the value of picking the right medicines to work with for the right intention, is that a lot of the time the experiences are not fun. They're not that enjoyable. And that's the point. It's like getting hit by a bus. Like if you learn all these powerful things, you're not going to go, hey, let's go get hit by a bus again so we can learn more.
Mm. That's really interesting. I think people tend to just abuse. Oh well, they use psychedelics as fun,
Mm.
and well, just I think most people just use these things for escapism. But I think when used in a productive manner is quite life changing, and also I always feel like when after a trip, like I just feel more loving. Like I feel so connected with everyone, So it's positive in a way. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that in terms of the feeling more loving, it's like what I often say comes up on these experiences, and it may not be this for everyone. Some people may not resonate with this, but I do believe that these psychedelic teachers do reveal what is in the way of the heart. And that sounds esoteric and wafty and lame and whatever, but when you do have those experiences, you kind of do realize that it is showing what is blocking you from showing up as your true authentic self. And that can be so powerful because a lot of the time when we are having our intimate relationships or our relationships with our friends and family, a lot of the time it's our shit that we're seeing in other people as the problem. We're going, oh, that person's selfish or that person's this. You're seeing the worst in you and other people. And it's when we can show up and go, take responsibility, like what Jocko Willink talks about, this extreme ownership concept, in going, I am responsible for all my interactions. I am the leader and I am responsible in all my relationships. And the way to enrich the relationships that we're having is one, pick better people to have a relationship with. That's on you. If you dated a crazy bitch, you chose to do that. That's on you. But the other thing as well is going, okay, if I've got these people in my life who I genuinely care about, or I'm stuck with them, they're my family, I can't change them, but I can change me. And sometimes that's not taking people's shit. Sometimes that's ending the toxic relationship that's bad for you, or it's putting your foot down and not getting walked all over. But a lot of the time, it's actually realizing and going, hey, I'm operating from unintegrated trauma that I need to resolve and I need to heal so that I can, rather than blaming the other person for all my problems, I can take ownership and responsibility and fix that. And that's huge.
Responsibility, just personal responsibility, is just um, I guess another thing that is very life changing, and couldn't agree more, man. And just before we move on to the next topic, maybe just an interesting fact is, you know how Adrian left North Lane
Hmm.
not long after, what album was that? The Quantum Flux album, whatever it was called. He became a psychologist. So just an interesting fact.
I
Yeah.
didn't know that. That's fantastic. I used to work at a music venue that North Lane played at a lot. And yeah, I remember he was having some trouble with his voice. And yeah, that's fantastic because there were so many lyrics on that first album that were so deep and so profound that you could tell that the dude, he'd been through some stuff and he understood some things about the world. And that's fantastic because music is such a powerful form of therapy. So yeah, healing people in other ways is beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he originally left for the voice thing, but yeah, he's a psychologist now. So I guess that's pretty interesting.
Awesome.
Um, yeah, so on the next topic, because we've talked about men a lot, and I wanted to, you know, as men, we cannot live without women. Women are, I guess, the yin to our yang. Um, and yeah, so basically, PCOS, birth control, endometriosis, these are things I see in a lot of my patients. It comes up a lot with the patients I see because women deal with pelvic pain a lot. Well, they come in and like tell me about the pelvic pain they experience, and a lot of the times the doctor does recommend physio for, I guess, overall like health and like strength and conditioning. And unfortunately, all the ones I've seen, like we haven't been able to make much progress because a lot of the exercises just aggravate a lot of the symptoms. And I normally just, yeah, there's not much I can do, and I just refer them back to the doctors. Um, but in your experience looking at hormones, what do you think is causing like this massive increase in, I guess, hormone imbalances in women? And I guess what can women who are struggling with these conditions focus on? on improving their symptoms?
That's a very good question, and I'm very far from a female specialist. It's having one woman in my life is enough for me to deal with. But when it comes to PCOS and endometriosis, the thing that I think is quite a wake up call, and people should ask their parents about this as well to get some insight, is like, I don't know about you, but if I take all the females who I've dated or met or been acquaintances over the course of my life who have been about my age or thereabouts, I would say more than half of them have problems with their cycle, whether it's PCOS, endo, or just like brutally bad, debilitating period pain that they can't function. Whereas if you ask your parents of how many women they knew with those issues when they were our age, probably zero, maybe one or two. Very, very rare. So it's become a hugely prevalent problem to the point now that it's just basically normal. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's heartbreaking with this stuff, just like it is with the men, because again, when I have run testing on, I mean, I don't work with a lot of women, but a lot of the time I'll, just look through someone's wife or their girlfriend's bloods just to kind of point them in the right direction and have a look at it. It's, to me, I see it as the same problem as the hypergonadism in men. It is a lot of the time with these women, for a female menstrual cycle, you're meant to have progesterone peak on day 21. So that's when you measure your progesterone peak levels. And a lot of the time, that progesterone comes back at like a 1, like it's zeroed out. They're not making any progesterone. So progesterone for a woman is a lot like testosterone for a man. It's it's basically, it works psychologically like a natural version of Valium. So they're basically deficient in their natural Valium. And then no wonder they're so stressed and cranked and anxious all the time, because they don't have this natural regulator in their bodies to actually not only get them through the pain of their cycle, because that progesterone is meant to get them through the rest of the month, but they've basically got the hormonal profile of a menopausal woman. And sometimes the progesterone to estrogen ratio is completely out of whack, because these chicks are also getting exposed to just as many xenoestrogens as we are. So this hormone imbalance causes all these problems, not just with PCOS and endometriosis, but also with miscarriages as well, because a robust level of progesterone is extremely important for the first trimester in creating a hospitable uterus. So you take a woman who's got poor mental health from her bad hormones already. She wants to be a mother more than anything, and then she keeps fucking miscarrying. Brutal, like absolutely horrible and devastating for their mental health. And then the problem is when they're going to the doctors, their doctors are treating the endometriosis or PCOS with birth control pills, which are artificial analogs of progesterone, which may help with some things a little bit, but makes all these problems way, way worse, because they're not getting the bioidentical metabolite of progesterone, but also the metabolites like allopregnenolone and all these different things that natural progesterone works with. It would be like a dude going to the doctor to get TRT, and he gets put on like nandrolone therapy, or he gets put on like tren monotherapy or something like that. An anabolic steroid, which is an analog of testosterone, but doesn't do all the natural things that testosterone is supposed to do. So the question again is like, why is this happening? I think it's the exact same reason as all the stuff we talked about with men: the environmental disruptors, the change in diet and lifestyle, the microplastics, all these different things are causing them to have these problems from the beginning. And then one big problem that I see that breaks my heart is that these women then get sold these bullshit gut protocols from health coaches to give them all these false promises of going, oh, if you take this probiotic and this greens powder and this superfood and this and that, you'll fix all your issues. The progesterone is still bottomed out, and all the digestive symptoms they're having are just a byproduct of the hormone deficiency. So they're still not getting what they need. And what they often need is just like a man. They need TRT. A man needs TRT. A woman often needs hormone replacement therapy, but with real bioidentical progesterone. And it is so, so, so difficult to actually find a practitioner who is going to give them what they actually need and have their best interest at heart. And then, they go to naturopaths and they get pumped full of herbs they don't need. They get, prescription B vitamins, which might all help with their symptoms 5 or 10%. But then the problem is they go through their whole life with this low progesterone issue. And then, in my opinion, that's what's leading to so much estrogen positive breast cancer and all these other physical and mental health issues that they're having around their fertility, around miscarrying, and then also the health of their future babies as well. Um, Causes hypothyroidism, causes them to become overweight, insulin resistance from the PCOS. Um, it's just as bad as what's happening with men. And then the problem is that they're going out and getting these birth control pills, which is making it even worse for them long term because that's disrupting their ability to have a healthy sex drive, healthy pheromones, healthy pair bonding, all these changes their psychology. And it's very, very sad because a lot of the time it's just this situation where they're just like a guy who's doing everything right but can't get his testosterone levels right and he needs hormone replacement. A lot of the time these younger women coming up as well, like, all they need to do, go to the doctor day 21, measure your progesterone levels, and if it's not where it should be for that phase and it's bottomed out at day 21, that's why you feel so shit, and everything that you're experiencing is because of this hormone deficiency. And then if you give them a list and go, hey, these are the symptoms of low progesterone in women, it can be like reading a biography of their life.
So you were saying before that testosterone is, I guess, hard to be prescribed because it makes men more rebellious. Why do you think it's so hard to get progesterone for women?
There's no money in it. So when a pharmaceutical company develops and this is what, like, there were many reasons I dropped out of my pursuit of neuropsychiatry. And one of the reasons is the profiteering from the pharmaceutical industry. So the pharmaceutical industry writes the medical guidelines for doctors to prescribe. Doctors are not trained in healing, they're trained in medicine. What is medicine in the Western country? Pharmaceuticals. So without going too down the conspiracy rabbit hole, just looking at the facts of the matter, is if you're a pharmaceutical company and you develop a new drug, you get a patent on it for 8 years, which means that no one else can make a generic version of it and you can sell it for whatever you want. Cialis is a good example of this. So Cialis used to be like 150, $200 for 4 tablets, and then it went generic, and now it's super cheap and accessible over the last couple of years because the patent expired. So what you find when you look at the progression of medicine, antidepressants is a good example, is the drugs that get prescribed by doctors are the ones that are promoted to them by the pharmaceutical sales reps. The pharmaceutical sales reps are promoting the drugs that are still under patent so the pharmaceutical company can make more. A lot of the time,
Yeah.
the patient might not pay the cost because the government subsidizes the drug, but the pharmaceutical company is still making the money. So this is why these doctors are prescribing. There's no money in progesterone. There's no money in bioidentical progesterone or in testosterone. It's why with testosterone they keep inventing these new bullshit delivery mechanisms. Like Sustanon was just them trying to extend the patent of injectable testosterone further. Now you've got stuff like these oral capsules, these 12 weekly injections, which don't work, but they're more marketable. So the doctors will prescribe them because the pharmaceutical sales rep can sell them. So there's no money in bioidentical progesterone, but there is money in new birth control pills. And then the doctors get trained that when a patient comes in with endometriosis or PCOS, what are the prescribing guidelines for it? And I've done a YouTube lecture on how this works with TRT. I've screenshotted and gone through the PBS prescribing guidelines. They're just doing what they're trained to do. Doctors are not bad people. They're not incompetent people. They're not trying to hurt people. They're just doing what they're told, and they think that what they're doing is the right thing. But the problem is that it's money. It's all money, and it's why it's really important for females and men, if they are working with hormone issues, to find someone who's not financially incentivized by selling you crap you don't need, but also someone who's actually working with these bioidentical compounds. So the way to do this, and this is what I've been teaching clients to do for years, is, let's say if you want to find a doctor near you who will prescribe you, like you found out that you've got low progesterone and you're a chick, and you want to find a doctor who is going to put you on bioidentical progesterone, not bullshit birth control, because it's impossible to convince a doctor to do this. And honestly, for good reason. Doctors shouldn't just do whatever their patients want without the research, but in these situations, the patient can be right. So what you want to do is you want to find a compounding pharmacy near you, call them, ask to speak to the head compounding pharmacist and say, hey, can you please help me out with a list of doctors nearby, ideally GPs, so you don't need a referral, who have recently prescribed bioidentical progesterone? And then the pharmacist will give you a list of doctors who prescribe that. And then that way you can go to that doctor and say, hey, I want to work with a tool that's in your toolbox. And you'll get a much better response rather than trying to get a doctor to prescribe something that they don't even know what it is.
That I think a lot of women will find value in that because I think right now it's literally just birth control. They just take birth control and just cop it, and like you said, it's normal now. It's pretty messed up.
Yep.
On that topic, I know you're not a woman, so hopefully women will also not take offense in how you suggest the way they deal with their bodies. People just get offended all the time. But I guess what are some fundamental differences between the way men should optimize their health and the way women should optimize their health? So I guess one example already is that with men's mental health, I guess we're more action focused. With masculinity being kind of like shitted on, like I guess men need to be seeking like healthy male role models, like good community, like joining a boxing gym. Because also nowadays, I feel like there's in the last few years, there's this message that's been propagated that men and women are the same, and I just don't believe that. I believe men and women are equal, but we're not the same. So I think a lot of the way our health is assessed and treated should also be slightly different. In your experience, what are some things? I guess fundamental differences.
I outside of the obvious physical differences, I see two major differences that men and women need to look at with their health. And I completely agree. I think that men and women are equal in the sense that we deserve equal basic human rights. But men are good at things that women are not good at, and women are good at things that men are not good at. Now, the whole issue with this is a lot of the things valued by a capitalistic society are the things that men are good at. And that's just the way it is. So there's two important things. One is that women bleed every month, men don't. So women have a higher predisposition to becoming anemic because they're losing iron in their menstrual cycle. So a woman needs to eat, and this in my research, it's what I found, about a kilogram of red meat per week to prevent becoming anemic if she has a healthy cycle. If she has a heavier flow, she is at a much higher chance of becoming anemic because a lot of chicks won't eat red meat. They'll eat chicken, pork, and fish because they think red meat's bad for you. It's going to make you fat. So they'll go through the whole month just eating white meat, then they'll bleed, and then they'll have low energy levels throughout the month because they're anemic. So it's very important that women look at their diet and they look at their iron levels and make sure they're not anemic. And if they are anemic, I don't recommend going and taking, prescription iron supplements, synthetic iron. You want to go out and get heme iron. So heme iron can be bought on Amazon. I think if you just search heme iron, HEME iron, I think it's called like Proferrin or something. You can buy that. Otherwise, Thorne make a good iron biglycinate supplement, which is better as well. But the other thing that they can do as well, another factor is that copper is very important for the body to be able to hold on to iron. So if you're in Australia, I don't have any financial affiliation with any of these products, but if you go onto a website called NextGen, NXGEN, they make like the desiccated organ supplements, like what Liver King promotes with like ancestral supplements. And there's one in there called Blood Builder, which is spleen, which is very high in iron, actual blood, so bovine blood, which is also very rich in iron, and then liver, which is high in copper to help you hold on to iron. So that's a very good nutritional source to prevent the body becoming deficient in iron and becoming anemic. So it's a big factor is women need to be very, very conscious of, are you getting enough heme iron in the diet? Over here, there's these bars that you can buy everywhere, and I'm pronouncing it wrong, but it's called like hematogenous or something like that. So they're everywhere. They look like candy bars. So I was eating one the other, a couple of years back. It was the second time I came here, and it looked like a brown version of like it tastes like a Milko, like a vanilla kind of good tasting. But I was like, these are weird. Like, why are these everywhere? Why do people eat these? It's called hematogenous, like hematocrit, because it actually contains blood. Like, it contains bovine blood. It's like a blood bar. And they're everywhere because over here the main source of meat is pork. So a lot of the time, doctors here will just say, just eat the hematogenous bars during your period so that you don't lose too much iron. Like, it's a blood bar. Um, so like over here, they've worked that out and they get that and they taste great. They're a great dietary source of blood. But that's a big factor, is making sure you're not anemic. And then if you are anemic, don't get the iron infusions, don't get the synthetic shitty iron. Go and either get a desiccated spleen and blood supplement like Next Gen, or get yourself a good quality heme iron supplement like I think it's called Proferrin on Amazon. Um, that's a big one. The other one with women, and women don't like hearing this, but it's just the way it is that the way that the average neurotransmitter profile is genetically for a woman versus a man makes her less resilient to stress. It's just the way that the brain works and metabolizes dopamine. So there's a reason why throughout history, like one of my favorite examples of the way a male brain works is the first episode of Vikings. So for those, have you watched Vikings?
I have not.
Motherfucker. Okay, so for everyone else, if you haven't watched Vikings, it doesn't ruin everything. But first episode is basically, so Ragnar, who's the main character, he's currently not in power in any way. He's just like a civilian, and the Earl is like in charge of the village they're in. I haven't seen this in a while. I might be butchering it, but what happens is Ragnar has basically gotten sick of raiding all the local villages in Scandinavia, and they want to cross the ocean. So no one had ever crossed the ocean yet, and because there's no way of navigating, so you just die. So his friend basically makes this experimental theoretical compass to allow them to stay on track, and it's like a floating thing in a bowl of water that may or may not work. So this whole storyline is that Ragnar is willing to completely risk his life, completely risk his whole status because he's been told not to do this, take a whole crew of men, build a boat just to see what's on the other side of the ocean because he wanted to know. Women don't do that. It's a male thing. And that's because we have brains generally that the neurotransmitter profile is more resilient to stress, lower dopamine levels, which drives us to go and do things which are more stimulatory and would make people more afraid. And then what do they do when they get out there? Take their weapons, they just kill everyone they see. That's an example of a male mind in a primitive context. So one thing that can cause women issues, particularly if they have low progesterone, so if you're already deficient in your natural version of Valium, you're going to be very predisposed to being stressed. So one thing that I think is great for women, and if you don't fall into this category and you're a chick, good for you. But if you're struggling with stress, you're struggling with your mental health, you're you're finding life is more stressful than maybe it should be, and it's impacting how you're showing up, how your relationships are. I think it's really important to focus on activities which are nurturing to the feminine energy, the way that it's important for a man to go out and do the things that's nurturing to the masculine. So instead of going out and doing martial arts and all these kind of things that, dudes do as therapy, it's about going out and doing forms of exercise that aren't so stressful and aren't so brutal. So dropping the high intensity interval training, dropping the powerlifting, and going and doing exercises like, you know, yoga, Pilates, all these different things which maybe have a lower threshold to stress if you're not doing well, rather than going and creating more stress in a context that may not be able to handle it. So if you're not doing well as a man, generally what you need to do is go and become more resilient to stress and stop being such a little bitch. But if you're a woman and you're not doing well and you're finding life difficult and stressful, that might actually make it worse because the brain is not set up to be able to handle that as well as a man. And going and doing things that more focus on like mindfulness meditation, nourishing the body, nurturing yourself, nurturing your feminine energy, that may be more what you're looking for to get the result. And I think that that's the problem when people are viewing men and women are the same, is that the way that we heal and the way that we thrive and the things that are beneficial for us some things are the same, but a lot of things are different, and it just comes down to neurochemistry and biology.
I think this is such a big topic because it's like by being so, is I don't know, you call this politically correct, you're causing so many people's health to be fucked. It's so like backwards. Like um, I don't know if this is a true statistic. I'd like someone to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think more women at a certain age, like at maybe past 30 or 40, like they're the highest percentage of people on SSRIs and antidepressants. Maybe just this. This is my guess. This is my opinion, by the way. This is not fact. Uh, Maybe just the whole feeling like they need to be like a CEO, like top managing CEO. They have to be married. They have to have kids. They have to be successful. Like it's that would be stressful to me. It's like and I already have like the mental cognitive cognition of a male, right? And women have to do this in a short time frame before they're like too old to have children. It's like way too much pressure, plus of all these like biological uh, baselines. It's just like a recipe for disaster. So um, yeah, I definitely agree. Like I find that women who are very happy, like to genuinely like childlike and playful and happy, tend to also not really have many health issues. Maybe that's just a confirmation bias, but um, yeah, it's like that. Maybe they're not even consciously nurturing their feminine energy, but just like spending time with children, just like being with family and like doing all that kind of stuff. I think is healing in a way for women in a way. That's my opinion. I'm not telling women to do what they need to do. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And it's such like a sensitive and PC subject that is very difficult. But what I say around this is like, if either men or women are suffering, and it's why I don't really speak on women's issues as much, because I'm not a woman. I don't intrinsically understand. I really think that women should work with female healers and men should work with male healers, because we intrinsically understand what's going on. I have no idea what it's like to be a chick. I wouldn't have a clue. But I have seen a fair amount of female suffering, and I've also kind of seen how the world works in a lot of ways. So, I have my insights and my theories, and I think that it's the same first thing to be doing is looking inwards. And I think that if you're struggling for direction and struggling for how to fix an issue that's going on for you, is looking within, through like a meditative practice or a mindfulness practice or even psychedelics, but finding a path within and working out and going, what am I either doing that I shouldn't be doing, or what am I not doing that I should be doing? Well, yeah, both of those. So doing that I shouldn't be doing, or I shouldn't be doing. Yeah, so both of them. You know what I mean? Um, what am I either neglecting or doing wrong, and then how can I resolve that? And I think that it's very difficult for women, as I said, because we live in a society that really values and encourages and puts the most value on things that are intrinsically male. Men are generally better at, and I think that creates a huge struggle for women who are not the outliers, because there is always going to be exceptions to the rule. But for the women who are struggling and who are finding that they're not fitting into the world the way that they should be, and they're finding it difficult or stressful, and they're not getting the satisfaction, and they're not happy, it's maybe going away from what society is telling them to be, what the modern Western society is telling them to be, and either looking within or looking at their roots and going, what actually makes me happy and what do I love? And the thing that pisses me off is when a woman says, I want to be a stay at home mum, I want to raise the kids, I want to look after the house, I want to look after my man. And then their female friends go, that's oppressive, that's patriarchy, that's this and that. But then all her female friends are on antidepressants and they're all miserable and they're all alone. And that can be a really big issue, is like, if you're going to go see a therapist or if you're going to go to someone for advice, get advice from someone who is where you want to be. So if that therapist doesn't have the receipts to go, hey, they're killing it. And that's why I think coaching is so much better than therapy, because you can go, okay, this person's either done or got through, or they're where I want to be. What can I do to be more like them and get the results that they're doing and reverse engineer that process, I think that's really good. But then the problem is that, and what I see in the healthcare space is that a lot of what females are being sold in health coaching or through naturopaths or whatever they're seeing is just snake oil scams as well. And I think that can be just like with men. I think and I like to relate people to cars. And if you've got a problem with your car, if your car's making a rattling noise, you go to a mechanic, they pop the hood, they make an assessment of everything that's going on. And sometimes what's rattling over here, the problem might be coming from over here. But you do a full, complete analysis of everything, and then you fix the problems. And we've got to start doing that with ourselves. So if you've got issues, if you've got health problems, energy problems, mood problems, menstrual cycle problems, whatever, comprehensive blood work, complete analysis of all your baseline systems by someone who is not trying to sell you shit and actually knows what they're doing. And then that way you can work out how to move forward and fix the problem, because the root cause may be something completely different than you think it is. And that's why it's just so important to go, okay, objectively, what can we fix here? And then that might downstream fix a whole bunch of other problems.
100%, man. And um, I hope anyone who I just can see a woman getting triggered at me and Dave speaking on women's health issues. But I guess like understand the context we're speaking from is because like I truly empathize with women because I see a lot of patients in their like 30s, 40s, um, and a lot of their honestly, a lot of their physical symptoms I can see it's just it's it's what do you call it? It's psychosocial.
Psychosomatic.
What's psychosomatic? That's the word. Yeah, it's psychosomatic. They're so stressed. I asked them about all their lifestyle habits and poor sleep. Has to take care of a kid. Has to work. It's like I honestly like feel so. I feel helpless because that's not the space that I work in, and I can only help them in I guess the physiotherapy space. But even one patient recently, like I just told her like you need just set a routine because I think right now you're just overwhelmed by life, and that's causing her pain. Like I didn't even give her physio treatment; it was like life advice, So yeah, like what Dave said. If any woman's listening to this, like maybe like stop listening to the I guess what society's been telling you if you're not feeling healthy, and just try something different. But yeah, that's all I'm gonna say on that.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear your thoughts because like I touched before, our mutual acquaintance Oscar Mays has started a uh, anti-aging company, and not anti-aging in like Botox and like cosmetics. It's like literally changing telomeres and reversing our biological age. I know you've talked about glutathione quite a lot on your page, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on, I guess, NAD plus glutathione, Phytotin, and I guess what are your thoughts on the future of longevity science? Do you think we're going to live forever? I don't know if like live till 200.
Yeah, that's a good question. For anyone who's young men who are listening to this, if you're not following Oscar, go follow Oscar on Instagram. The dude is a fascinating dude who posts some amazing stuff. So highly recommend, if you're not already, go give him a follow. Um, so yeah, it's a very good question. I'm a bit more conservative when it comes to supplements. I'm a very guilty until proven innocent kind of person um, when it comes to supplements and medications. It was one of the biggest things I learned from my stint looking at neuropsychiatry was how little long-term safety studies there are on so many of these drugs. So when it comes to supplements, I think the best things that we can do are stick to the things that are bioidentical to the human body, which is one of the reasons I love glutathione so much. One of the reasons I love testosterone so much. So I'm a huge advocate of glutathione supplementation, whether it's NAC as a precursor, oral bioavailable glutathione infusions, or injections. So I personally do the injections, but there's all different kind of ways to get it into the body. Like liposomal delivery works well. Even the oral time-released systems works well because it's bioavailable in the mucosal lining in the gut. Um, when it comes to supplements, I think there are so many things that are beneficial to take, as I said before, but aren't really needed. And I think that when people are looking at supplements, I think that the things to do with optimizing mitochondrial function, optimizing cellular function, and reducing inflammation are the things that people benefit from the most, because I think we live in a much more stressful, polluted, urbanized environment than we used to live in. And I think that if people do want to take supplements that they may benefit from but don't necessarily need, I think glutathione is a great place to start. When it comes to the NAD plus, NAD infusions, NAD injections, NR or NMN, I think it's a very interesting field of research. I used, without getting this podcast banned, I used all forms of NAD and precursors for treating a certain virus that went around. Um, and originally, to be honest, I thought it was a scam. I thought it was snake oil. I didn't touch it. It was only when one of my colleagues was actually like, nah, dude, you should actually look into this. There's more research about it now, because I remember they were talking about it on podcast years ago, and I was like, expensive, not well studied, not really too keen on this. But the proof was very much in the pudding, in terms of how effective it was for reversing not only the acute symptoms of this virus, but acute symptoms of the, won't go down that rabbit hole, but the other thing that people got. So I think that the NAD stuff is that there needs to be more research done on the safety of it. I have seen the studies that were showing that like cancer had elevated NAD levels, but that doesn't mean that supplementing NAD is going to give you cancer. When you understand how the cycle of NAD works in the body, it's not really something that is causative. It's just a byproduct of cellular function. But it's something that when people take it, they genuinely do feel a difference. Or they stop taking it and they go, oh, that's what that was doing. I feel a difference now. So I've used nicotinamide riboside quite extensively, doses of like 400 to 800 milligrams a day, and I found it to be quite profound. I don't take it daily anymore, just because I very strongly steer on the side of caution, because I had such a severe brain injury previously that I just don't fuck with anything personally that's an unknown. That's just me. But I think that when it comes to risk to reward, I think that the risk for these kind of things at the moment looks very low. The reward looks very high. I haven't looked into fisetin yet. It's not a compound that's actually been on my radar until he actually released it, which was the first time I saw it. So I'm very interested in looking into that one. I think it's interesting. I think that, however, going back to the diet and lifestyle stuff before, my concern is that people look at this stuff and go, oh, well, I can just take this supplement. Oh, I can just eat like crap and take a multivitamin. And all of this stuff is just meant to be it's supplementing, right? It's adding to all the stuff that you're doing at the moment. So, if you're currently not looking after your body well, you're not looking after your diet well, you're not looking after your life stuff well, do those things first and then look at the supplements on top of that. The other thing I will add is that the thing that NAD, in my experience, outside of certain side effects from things, has the most application for that people don't seem to know about is chelating heavy metals. It's actually indicated in Australia under Medicare to have NAD infusions to rip heavy metals out of the body. So if you're, particularly the WA boys, if you're doing FIFO work, you're an offsider, you're working underground, or you have exposure to heavy metals and you find them elevated in your body, that's how you get it out. That's the best way to get it out, is doing a course of NAD infusions. That is what it's for.
That's a really interesting tip. I didn't realize that.
Mm.
Awesome. Thanks for your thoughts on that. So the next question is more of a business question, because you did go into, like, one of your university degrees was business. You've worked in digital marketing before, currently working as a health coach. I'm sure you've heard of Alex Hormozy. He's like this business guy he recently said that personal branding is like the most important thing. And I guess we can use Mr. Beast as an example. Like, he recently, if you don't know who Mr. Beast is, he's like he's probably the most popular guy on YouTube. I don't know, like 100 million, I don't know, 100 million plus subscribers, some crap like that. And he recently turned down like a massive like deal to sell his YouTube channel. And I think Alex Hormozy pretty much said is like, the thing is, with a personal brand, you can lose all your money, and you can just say something to your following and be like, "Hey, just everyone give me 1 cent, and he'll be $100 million, 100 million, 100 like billionaire again," right? So the power of personal branding and just marketing is very powerful in today's digital social media age. So, in your experience working in an agency, do you have any thoughts and tips, or yeah, I guess thoughts and tips on personal branding?
Yeah, I do. I was, as I said, I was very fortunate to intern and be mentored by the someone who I consider to be probably the best at, kind of like social media marketing, like digital marketing, click funnels, that kind of stuff, like Facebook retargeting, all that kind of stuff. Um, so I was when I started doing what I do now, I didn't really intend to actually launch this as a business. It just kind of happened, and I've never deliberately done any form of marketing strategy for my brand because I just sponged so much of that I just kind of naturally did what I've done because I just understand it because I spent so much time doing it. So the most important thing to consider is that people, particularly our generation, we have a very strong bullshit radar. We've been advertised to and sold to from birth. People don't like brands, they like people. Um, so when I look at marketing, I've never spent a cent on marketing. I only have a website because one of my clients built it for me because I didn't need one. Um, I deliberately have the ugliest Instagram page that I know of, deliberately. Um, and all of these strategies have been one around the fact that I don't like digital marketing anymore. I'm over it. I just don't like it. I don't like business. I just don't enjoy doing it. But the other thing was that I understood how to build a brand, and it's all about brand equity. When you're looking at what a lot of people are doing, they're doing shit because that's what everyone else is doing, not because they actually have a branding strategy or an idea around how to market. So if I want to spend a day marketing myself, I'm not going to put $1,000 into Facebook ads and blast it out to cold traffic. I'll take on 5 pro bono clients and I'll work with 5 people for free. I won't rub it in people's face and parade it around because publicizing your charity is lame. But I will do that because that is how you grow a word of mouth, brand equity based strategy that is authentic. So being authentically yourself is very, very important. I learned very quickly when I used to pitch digital marketing strategies that I would convert more clients wearing a leather jacket and swearing than I would wearing a suit because it was real. Um, People like real, but people also respond well to people who aren't openly trying to make money off them. So price gouging is an awful thing to do. You will make far more and I learned this from music. If I made a show $5 or $10, I'd make more money if it was five because you'd get more people, you'd get more than double the amount of people at 5 than 10. So people need to look at their pricing and going, if the customer knows that you are charging the most that you can get away with, they don't like you, especially working in healthcare. It's dishonest, and it contradicts what your core values are meant to be. So I built my brand primarily, I believe, was one of the biggest things I did was the pregnenolone and DHEA lectures that I put on YouTube. I put a huge amount of content and value for free because I genuinely wanted to help people when that came through. People could see and go, hey, this guy actually wants to get this stuff out there. I like him. I'm booked out for. I mean, when I release new consultation appointments, I don't even get to email them out to my list. They just go instantly just from my network. I could double my price and still be booked out if I wanted to, but people wouldn't like me as much because it's clear that I'm just charging what I can get away with. So it's important that your marketing strategies align with the business that you're doing. And if you're working in healthcare and trying to help people, if you're openly trying to make as much money as you can, people aren't going to trust you. I don't have affiliate codes. I don't peddle affiliate products because that would damage my brand more than the money I would make from selling this shit. So people actually, if I say, hey, you should go and take, like the next gen supplement or the Proferrin, like I mentioned before, people will actually trust me saying that because I'm not trying to make a bunch of money. Um, So the other thing is like the ugly Instagram account. So back when I used to do digital marketing back in 2012, 2014, everyone's Instagram accounts were ugly. So I would have beautiful, professional photography, amazing videography, like all this beautiful graphic design to break the noise. Now everyone's social media looks like that. So the only way I can break the noise is having the ugliest Instagram profile I can think of. But that also speaks to the authenticity. So it lines up with what I'm trying to do in terms of
Mm,
branding. So it's important that people understand that you have to you have to earn the trust of the people that you're working with. And it is much better. The thing that I was taught from this mentor that I had is he goes that your goal in your business should always be to exceed expectations. So always go above and beyond. Um, but the other goal is that every single person that you either sell to or that you work with, your goal should be to make them a brand ambassador. So you want every single person to be a brand ambassador for what you do. The only way that you can get them to do that is if they actually intrinsically like you and they feel like that you went above and beyond for them, because now there's like what Hormozy talks about is reciprocity. So it's all basically doing the right thing will get you to where you want to go. It's so like I really think that advertising is only needed if your product sucks or if you priced it wrong. Um, so that's one factor. But the other thing as well is like you got to go against the grain. Like there's if someone else is doing what you're doing, then you have to compete with them or you have to compete on price, and all that stuff is a very difficult thing to do. So doing something that is truthfully and honestly authentic to who you are, and then pricing at a point where that you respect your customers and you're not juicing them, um, and then genuinely being the best at what you do. I'm hugely passionate about. I'm not arrogant, and I don't think I'm the best person in the world at what I do, but I know that I'm fucking good, and I've got the receipts to show it. Like, I mean, I've got. It's why I love posting, my clients' blood work in my group, because I can actually go, "Hey, I'm not full of shit and scamming people. This is real." Um, so people like realness, and focus your marketing on giving people value. Like I said, I could spend $1,000 on ad spend, or I could spend $1,000 of my time working with people who wouldn't be able to afford it, and then creating brand ambassadors that way. Plus, you get to practice your skill set, and you get to enjoy what you're doing, and you get to genuinely make a difference. And for me, like as I said, I mean, I wasn't intending for this to be a business and grow the way that it has. And I'm very blessed that I get to basically all the stuff that I used to talk to people about and my friends didn't care about. Now people pay me to talk about, which is really cool. Um, but yeah, you've got to respect your clients and your customers, and a huge part of that is not ripping them off, and genuinely delivering. And if you do those things and you're genuinely good at what you do, you won't have any trouble growing your business.
some solid points there. Uh, yeah, I don't have much to add to that. That was really good. And I guess for anyone who is looking for a very good hormone specialist, because I have personally worked with and personally am working with Dave, and it is true he really knows his shit. Where can they find you, Dave? I know it's very hard to book with you. I've had people like after sharing a few posts from you, people will ask me like, "How do I work with this guy?" And it's hard to book you. So I guess where can people find the next available slots?
Yeah, man, absolutely. So um, everything that I've tried to do, there's a very difficult line between in terms of pricing, in terms of not undercharging and like devaluing your product and service. Um, and that's something that has been a tricky one for me in terms of not giving everything away, and that's why, as I said, because I don't price gouge and jack my prices, I am booked out quite far in advance. So the best way to work with me is to jump on my website, which is advancedfundamentalhealth.com. Just submit an inquiry, and you'll get a response with any of my upcoming availabilities or anything to do about that. I have a private Facebook group, which is a paid group. It's $19 a month. And to be completely honest with your listeners, the only reason I charge for that group is to keep people out of it. It's worth a shit ton more than $19 a month, but I've just seen how other Facebook groups degrade because just everyone joins them and just there's no etiquette in them. So the only reason I've got a price barrier on my group is for the community aspect of it. So that's the only reason I charge for that. Um, but the advantage of joining my group is that I do Q&A sessions twice a week. So I sit here with the microphone and just answer whatever questions people have for however long they come in, which I think is something that a lot of providers won't do. And I think it's important to answer. This is something I'm very big on. It's very important to answer the question that you've been asked 1,000 times as if it was asked the first time, because that person is genuinely struggling with that question. So I answer the same fucking questions all the time. And it's about explaining it in a way that people will understand, but also understand the value in going, hey, you need help with this, and this is the response. So but in that group, I post my appointment availability first, so that's the kind of way to get in before it goes out to the public. But my booking availability is live on the website if people want to check that out. You can book in anytime. I've also written a book called TRT 101. I wrote this because I'm a one man show and I can't see everyone, and I wanted to still be able to help everyone. So um, there's books out. There's a great book by Jay Campbell called the TRT Bible or the TOT Bible, which is like, what is TRT? What is testosterone injections? That's already been written and it's been written well. It doesn't need to be rewritten. This is a short instruction manual that is written like a textbook and being like, this is my template of how I do TRT. So I've basically given away the secret sauce so that people can do it themselves, because the biggest issue that I've observed with TRT is that it's just not done right. So I've got a full template in terms of like timeline, blood work, how to do it, all that kind of stuff. It's 29 Australian dollars. And the goal of that is for me to be able to essentially service a larger community. So it's giving away, a huge amount of IP, a huge amount of processes that took me years to work out from working one-on-one with people to get like a not a cookie cutter protocol but a templatized approach, and it's written in a way that it is completely understandable for the layperson. So if you can't work with me and you want to get your TRT dialed in, $30 and the ebook's yours.
And people can also find you on Instagram, yeah? Is it I'm Dave Lee?
I'm Dave Lee on Instagram. Yep, it's I tend to repost some stuff in my group in there. I do some Q&A stuff. I post a bit more, opinion-y based stuff on there. And yeah, if people want to follow my work for free, you can do that as well. If you want to check me out on YouTube, there's a YouTube channel called the TRT and Hormone Optimization Channel. I make boring lectures for that channel, so I don't do the clickbaity, controversial videos. I sit down with a PowerPoint and do lectures. So I've got lectures on, modafinil, meditation, stuff that's a bit left field, stuff that's, a bit less for the algorithm, but more, genuine stuff that people can check out. So yeah, you can jump on YouTube and check out those lectures as well if you'd like. I've got a few more coming. I've got one on masculinity, and I've got another one coming on pregnenolone as well. So a few more videos coming on YouTube if people want to check that out.
Awesome, man. And before we get to the final question, we do have to ask you, why are you currently in Lithuania?
That's a good question. Firstly, I like the cold. I don't like the Australian heat. I'm not built for it. Originally, I came here because my dad moved here years and years ago, and I wanted to check it out. So when I had that experience with the shaman, I was actually in Amsterdam on, connecting up to come here. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that I like about this place. There's a whole bunch of stuff I hate about this place, but at the moment, there's a lot of stuff going on in Australia that I don't agree with, and I find it very difficult in terms of it being a place that I love so much and that I grew up, and I find it quite difficult to be there at the moment in terms of what the government has done to the country, particularly around the healthcare system, the nursing system, even the police, in terms of just the lack of funding for them to do their jobs. There's a huge amount of stuff that I really find quite bothering, but I also find what I find more bothering is the Australian public's acceptance of the deep corruption that is present in our political system. So, I grew up on punk rock and rebelling against the system and thinking critically, but I also don't want to get arrested. So I chose to pick a country which kind of aligns a bit more with my values. The other things I like about this country, I mean, one, my girlfriend lives here, so that's always nice. But there's this country is very real. It's harsh. It's difficult. It's not as pretty. It's difficult with the language. I mean, the language is one of the oldest languages in the world. It's very hard to learn and to speak. And when I originally moved here, so I'd been here a few times, and then I actually moved here when I got separated from my ex-fiance. And the reason why I moved here was that going through that separation, although it was absolutely for the best, and I'm very grateful that it ended, it's still very difficult to be to sever a tie that is so deeply emotionally. Like if you're going to marry someone and spend your life with someone, and then find out that that is not a good fit, and that there's hurt exchange in that dynamic, it's still very difficult, even if you know it's for the best. So I actually took a step back in that situation and actually went, I'm not handling this. I'm finding this very difficult. And this is someone who made it through all the other shit that I went through. So when I was sitting there back in Perth in a state of discomfort, in a state of a bit of emotional turmoil, my reaction was to go and do something harder. I said, I can't handle this, so I need to go and do something harder to make this seem easier. So I went and moved to a country that I only knew two people, didn't speak the language, and it's a much harsher environment to live in. And I came over here to basically toughen up. And that was one of the most profound experiences that I ever did, because it opened my eyes to what another level beyond in terms of my masculine development there was to go, but also that in those times of crisis and difficulty, it's about taking a step back and going, hang on, this is just a broken heart. This feels like it's never going to end, but it will. But there will be harder things in life that will come up after this. And if I can't handle this, I'm fucked. So that's why I chose to move over here. I was here for about a year and a bit. Went back and forth, back to Perth a couple of times. And then I really just felt like this was kind of where I need to be at this point. And one of the reasons I also love it here is that I've got one of the best Muay Thai coaches and best gyms to train at ever. They've got such an amazing fight culture over here, which I really, really love, because I'm a complete Muay Thai rookie. And that's one of the reasons I love it here as well, because it humbles the fuck out of me. So I think and the thing I loved when I came back to Perth is just how easy life felt after you live here. When you live somewhere that you don't speak the language, the climate's harsh, everything's just harsh and difficult, and you go back to somewhere like Australia, it's just like life on easy mode. And it was just a process of wanting to level up. And then kind of when I looked between the two and the pros and cons of living in both, I decided that I liked it here better. So that's why I'm back here for now. I would love to, my goal at the moment is to, I want to go see the Northern Lights in Scandinavia before winter ends. I'd really like to do that. But I also, like, my ancestry is primarily Scandinavian. So there's something over here that, like, it feels more like home, even though it's not home. And yeah, it's also about just having different experiences and seeing different sides of the world. The thing that I learned from Eastern Europe is that when you look at people's problems over here, it's because they don't have enough money to do what they need to do. They can't pay the rent. They're already working overtime. They don't have the resources to do what they need to do. In Australia, the main problem people have is they're just not doing the things that they should be doing. They're just being lazy. They know how to solve their problems. They're just not doing it. And seeing the difference it very much helped my perspective in working with men, in terms of being like, just seeing more of the world and understanding more of human nature. So yeah, I like it here.
Really interesting, because it's like, it's almost like too much of a good thing can be a bad thing, and that's in the sense of comfort, right? And yeah, in my, I guess, experience of viewing Eastern Europeans on media, they've always been like tough and like cold, and like you don't fuck around with Eastern Europeans. So
no, really you don't fuck with people here, like, and but Andrew Tate said that the closer that you move to the poverty line, the more people revert to their gender roles, and that's hugely true. Like, Um, there's a, here, like in winter, if you're a woman who's alone, you're going to have a much worse time than like you need a man. And men need women in winter as well. It's cold and it's lonely, and we need that connection. Like we need each other more here. And I like that because people just behave differently. And yeah, there's the thing that I like about this place, and I've said it to a few people here, and they often say that Westerners say the same thing, is that like in Australia, like most people are pretty friendly to you. Like you can smile and wave, and most people will be friendly, treat you very politely at a shop. Like the shop staff are always friendly, but I've always found it difficult to find people who are actually genuinely nice people under that,
Sure.
genuinely good principled people. Over here, it's the opposite. Everyone's a fucking asshole. Everyone is like hard, like very, very hardened. Like there's just people that you just don't fuck with, like just old men who are just like, nah, like that dude is scary. But it is, I have met more kind-hearted, genuine people here than I have met in Australia. Like there's less friendly people, but the ones who are friendly, they're people who would genuinely have your back, but they expect you to have yours, have theirs,
Mm,
sorry, because
mm,
we need each other here. I mean, it's fucking freezing at the moment. So like, yesterday, like we were outside and like the car got stuck in the snow. There was three guys, or sorry, two to the two neighbors all helping each other, basically dig our cars out because we needed teamwork. And then when someone got stuck, after putting 20 minutes on Facebook, there was some guy who rolled up with a truck to tow him out. Just some guy who lives locally who was just helping people out with that because it needed to be done. So there's this different aspect over here because it's a harsher world, and relationships I think are more important here. I think family is more important here. Um, but it also just makes me appreciate Australia so much when I go home in terms of like how pretty and how beautiful and how easy life is in Australia. And I really hope that the political situation turns around.
super interesting. And I guess that's also a perfect segue to our final question, which is basically this whole podcast we've been talking about optimization of hormones. And I think for the audience that is listening to this podcast, we're all trying to improve every facet of our lives. And hormones is literally affecting our physical, mental, emotional. It's affecting so many facets of the human experience, you know. And I think it's really cool to see that you're literally living and breathing what you say. The fact that you'd moved to Lithuania to level up is just is just so on brand. I know it's not on purpose, but it's just like that's how aligned you are with what you do, you know. And it's almost like a whole like cycle because testosterone and optimizing your hormones allows you to fully manifest that. But yeah, basically, my final question is, I guess, why do you believe it's important to be, I guess, holistic and 99 every aspect of your life?
When you say 99 every aspect, is in like leveling up each aspect, like not just a little bit, but going as much into it as you can?
Yeah, maximizing everyone, every single facet.
Hmm. Why? I think there's a lot of reasons. You know, echoing what Tate says, I mean, one is it's player versus player. So we're living in a competitive world. There is only X amount of resources and money and those kind of things. I think that's a factor. Um, the thing that I found, as I said, I mean, I cruised through a lot of my life and kind of took the piss a little bit and realized that I wasn't where I wanted to be. And it was only when I committed to radical self improvement that I actually got to. I mean, we're never exactly where we want to be because we always have more goals, but it was only at that point that I actually really saw progression in my life. And I'm very big on New Year's resolutions. I think that people shit on them because they just don't act. People go, "Oh, you never keep your New Year's resolutions." You don't, and that's why you think they're lame. I do. And one of my favorite things at the end of every year and the start of every year is, and I remember each New Year's for the last 5 or 6 years, I like to look back and go, because some people go, "Oh, this year went by so quick," yada yada yada. I'm like, nah, I'm in a completely different place than I was last year, and that's the thing that I love doing is looking back and going, "What did I do last New Year's? Where was I, and what have I accomplished since? And did I tick because people go, oh, New Year's resolutions are shit. It's because you can't stick to a 12-month goal. And I'm like, did I tick the long-term goals that I wanted to tick? And since the answers for that have always been yes, I've been able to progress so much further as a man that I'm a very self-critical person, but I'm also very proud of myself. And I think that it's important that we're proud of ourselves. So I think that if you're not actually committing to being the best man you can be and making the most of the potential that you've been given by your parents, your ancestors, God, the universe, however you see it, I think that you should feel guilty. And the thing that I really love is that, like, I usually take like one full day off a week. Just like, I find that works with my schedule really well. So no training, no work, no clients. I'll usually turn my phone off. I just have a full day off, and that always feels so well earned to me. Like, it feels so earned, and I love that feeling. I love the feeling. I struggled with mental health growing up. Not struggled with it, but I didn't. I was always a bit afraid and a bit anxious and a bit down, and for different reasons. And I've really found the cure for that has been pride in myself, but actually having a reason to be proud of myself. So when you look around and you see that people who aren't like, I think it's simple. Like, you look at everyone who you look up to and everyone who's where you want to be in terms of, or doing what you want to do, or they've accomplished something, and then going, okay, what do they all have in common? And then you look at everyone else who's depressed, not doing well, sad, and you go, okay, what do they have in common? And I like that, because you can go, okay, now we just need to reverse engineer down all the things that I need to do to be the best version of myself. And that takes a fuck ton of work, but it's not like doing shitty office admin work for your boss that you don't want to do. It's doing stuff that's good, it's fun, it's rewarding, it's satisfying. And I think it's important. Like, I think it's important because it's the only thing that I think is going to get people to where they want to be. And I just did it, and then I looked back on it and I was like, okay, that, like, this is what it did for me, and then I'm going to keep doing this. Like, I saw the proof in the pudding, and then I continued doing it. So it's I I never thought I would be the person. It's why I identified so much with Goggins' story, is that, like, I never thought I would be the person to be talking about masculinity. I never thought that I would be the person who's doing anything that I'm doing now, because it's just not who I was. And there was just a point where I just woke up to myself and to where I was at, and I was like, I'm just going to go all in on this. I'm just going to I'm going to be proud of myself and be proud of the man that I can be, because what else is there to really do? And I think it's important, because if you don't do it, what else are you going to do, and how are you going to live a life that I think is worth living? To me, it's the cure for depression, and that goes back to when I was originally wanting to find what was causing people to have this low grade depression and all these issues. It's that people aren't proud of themselves, and if you're not proud of yourself, why not? And it's because you're doing something wrong. So um, yeah, I think it's important to do all the things that you're mentioning, because that's what you need to do to be proud of yourself. And I think that pride in oneself, legitimate pride that is well earned, is the cure for one of the many cures for depression in men.
So well said. And just a kind of concluding statement is like, confidence is competence. Doing stuff, showing yourself through reference experiences of action is how you physically can see that you can be confident, right? So thank you, Dave, for joining us today on 99 Everything. And yeah, like, anyone who's interested in working with Dave, like, you won't regret it. Like, it, it's just watching his Instagram Q&As, I've learned so much about health, and that's from someone who's already quite interested in health and like knows quite a lot. But it's always good to learn more. So if you're interested in this health space and optimizing your wellness and performance, definitely check out Dave's Instagram. And yeah, if you enjoyed the podcast, definitely leave a rating on Spotify, or a thumbs up, or a comment on YouTube. But that's pretty much it for today, guys. We'll check you out on the next podcast.
Thanks
Peace.
very much for having me.